Chair, you have a live mic.
Good morning, everybody.
I was here early, I'm late.
That's right, we'll let you come in. I was going to tell a joke, then I decided not to, then I decided to.
Come on.
You know, Commissioner Saunders, he says that, words matter. So, and when you say that, I think about the couple that went to the counselor and he said, "Counselor, we're not getting along." And the counselor said, "What are you not getting along about?" And he said, "Well, it's incompatibility. I lost my income and she lost her patability."
Is that a joke from personal experience? No. Dot was over here going, yeah.
I have lost my income, but she's never lost her patability. Moving right along. We'd like to do the prayer.
Commissioners, we have the invocation by Pastor David George, First Naples, and followed by the pledge, Richard Lee, U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant, Purple Heart recipient, and 7 years of active duty, 2 tours in Vietnam.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we come before you this morning humbly to ask your blessing over this meeting. The Bible teaches us in Romans 13 that you have both ordained and established earthly governments for our good and for your glory. May these elected officials do just that, do what is best for the citizens of Collier County, and bring you glory in their deliberations and their decisions. Please give each one of them the wisdom of Solomon, the courage of David, and the humility of Jesus as they represent this great county. Furthermore, Lord, I pray for all those here who will have the opportunity to share their thoughts and concerns, both positive and negative. I pray they will have the courage to share calmly and that they will feel that they have been heard. Please be merciful to us sinners, Lord. For it is in the matchless name of Jesus, the only name under heaven, given among men, by which we might be saved, that we pray and make our petitions. Amen.
Amen. Very nice.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I make a better door than a window door.
Commissioners, we have Commissioner Kowal, who is participating by Zoom. So if we could get a motion to allow his participation, please.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us to changes for July 9th, 2024. Just one item to correct the placement of item 16F6 should have been placed as 16L1. This is a recommendation to accept a donation of public art to be installed in the Bayshore Gateway Triangle redevelopment area parking lot at 3321 Bayshore Drive. With that, there are no additional changes. County Attorney.
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioners, ex parte and disclosures on the summary and consent agenda, or any further changes?
Commissioner Saunders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No changes, no ex parte, but I would like to, on the consent agenda, have it reflected that I have a no vote on item 16F5, which is the budget amendments dealing with the transfer of funds from Conservation Collier.
So noted. Mr. Kowal?
Good morning. I have no changes to the agenda, and I have no disclosures for consent or summary. And no jokes. I have no jokes this morning.
Come on, Commissioner Kowal. Step it up. Commissioner McDaniel?
Good morning. I have no changes nor any ex parte.
Commissioner LoCastro?
Same for me. No changes, no ex parte.
No changes, no ex parte for me.
We could get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2B is the board minutes from June 11th, 2024.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us all the way to item 5A, which is Artist of the Month. If I can direct your attention to the back of the room. The July Artist of the Month is the Audubon Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. 70 years ago, brave voices in our community spoke up to protect ancient trees from the threat of the axe and saw. The sanctuary protects more than 13,000 acres in southwest Florida as a haven for plants, animals, and people in the heart of the Everglades ecosystem. The famous 2.25-mile boardwalk is an adventure through the largest old-growth bald cypress forest in North America. This photography exhibit celebrates the past 70 years of conservation and looks ahead to the next 70 years. With that, that brings us to item 7, which is public comments on general topics not on the current or future agenda.
We have one registered speaker at this time, Dr. J.B. Holmes.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Chairman Hall, my name is Holmes, Dr. J.B. Holmes. I'm back in regards to the VA nursing home, no surprise. I want to thank you once again for all the hard work you've done on that, and Commissioner Saunders particularly. I want to note your hard work and dedication on that. And I have recently been advised, Commissioner Saunders, that men with white beards are the smartest, hardest working, best looking men there are, okay? So we thought we'd get that one out of the way.
Another thing that
That was my attempt at a joke, Commissioner Hall. So anyway, well, that wasn't a joke. That was true.
that's one of those things, another one of those things that you and I agree with.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, in regard to the VA nursing home, following up on that, I have been advised by the Department of Veterans Affairs that there is no priority list. That priority list will not be released until after the budget is released in October. So we don't know where we stand, where Collier County stands on that list. We know we are competing against California and Texas, and that decision will not be made by elected officials. That decision will be made by Department of Veterans Affairs administration officials. So, and I've also been advised that in that budget, although we're requesting $74 million, there's only available for new construction of extended care facilities, $171 million. I looked at the budget myself, and it only shows $141 million. So we would like to have $74 million, and we're competing against two other states that are larger and maybe more influential. In my discussions with the Department of Veterans Affairs and with our congressman, they have requested that this is what my request is to you today, is that they would like to hear from public officials, particularly Senator Rubio and Senator Scott. They want to hear from public officials to be sure this is because they don't know the situation in detail in Collier County like we all do here. So they want to hear from public officials to make sure this is an important community project. So I'm asking you, and I came in with Crystal Kinzel today, Crystal Kinzel, all elected officials, please, and all elected officials listening today, all elected officials that we can contact, please contact Senator Rubio and Senator Scott and advise them of our support for the Florida VA nursing home on the old Golden Gate Golf Course. I will be back in the future. There's a confusion point on the $20 million for the daycare center. I'd like to discuss that with you, Commissioner Saunders, off the record. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Holmes.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 10.
Can I make a quick comment on that? Sure. Mr. Holmes, Sergeant Holmes, J.B. Holmes, Commander Holmes of the VFW. Just as a side note, and you know this already, but just for the record, one of the reasons why all 5 of us went to Tallahassee earlier this year was to do that very thing. Now, our job's not done, but we did more than plant the seed. We actually met personally with Senator Scott, and at the time, Senator Rubio, I think, was out of the state. So we met with his key officials and went all the way down the line, even threw in, Congressman Donalds, and we hit all the main offices and came with a stack of materials and everything. So that's step one. That doesn't mean we're done, but we've already, more than planted the seed in person. And I think every single office, I don't want to say I think, I know every single office we walked into, the first thing they said is, all 5 commissioners are here, and then we were with John Mullins and his team, and some of our key folks that are on the Tallahassee staff. We'll continue to do that, as well, because I think that was, that was one of the more impressive things. And it might seem like it's just a glad handing and a grip and grin, but as you know, relationships are everything. And I don't know if people from California are doing that, but we pounded the pavement for 2 days in Tallahassee, and 99% of what we were doing was the veterans nursing home. So we'll continue that. We'll follow John Mullins' lead. I don't know if I see him back there anywhere. Oh, there he is. If he thinks it's advantageous for us to go back up there, maybe even bring some veterans with us. And even though we sound like a broken record to some of those folks, we want to be a little bit of a mosquito without being annoying. And that trip was very successful. And so we'll continue that as well. So I think if we're all burning the candle at multiple ends, that's going to give us the best chance to continue moving forward. So, but I appreciate your comments.
Thank you for your
It's not lost on us. We'll keep doing it the max of what we need to do. And I just think in person's way better. We could all write letters. Senator Rubio's not going to read my letter. It's going to sit in a box somewhere. When we walk in the office and all 5 of us are in the waiting room, and we did see some of the key officials that were there, we scheduled it because that's powerful. That's powerful. And they told us so. Go ahead.
One other note too, and well, just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean there isn't anything happening. I mean, when we were in Washington, D.C., I got a phone call from Mario Diaz-Balard's office, and the first appropriation, the entire $9 million request, got through the subcommittee. Now it has to go to the big committee, then it has to go to Congress, and it has to get to the White House in order for it to come through. But there are things that are transpiring, even though it doesn't look like there's anything transpiring. I got that phone on I think it was 4 appropriations that were coming out of Diaz-Balard's office with regard to that Everglades and I-75 and a wastewater plant down in Everglades City. So there's a lot more going on than just us, as he said, going to Tallahassee and shaking hands. There's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, Doc.
Okay, I thank you for your support, and I appreciate everything you're doing. I notice you also have a white beard, so you're going to be in the white beard club there.
I was petting it earlier, but you didn't acknowledge me, so.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. I agree with everything that's been said, that we are obviously making that effort. I think what you're suggesting is a great idea. I think that, and we've always been talking about generating local support for this project. I've got a group of about 150 veterans that are part of a group that are friends of the nursing home. The reason I mention that is I think in order to be most effective, if we could direct and request letters from elected officials to be addressed to the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs, but to have those letters delivered to either to you or to me, and that way we can collect letters and then we can send them and make sure that they get there in a package, or quite frankly, we can go up and hand deliver them. Because I would agree with Commissioner LaCastro. They start getting individual letters from, say, a council member from Marco Island, it's going to go in a box someplace. The senator or the congressman is not going to see that. But if we have a collection of letters and we go up and we hand deliver them and say, listen, we have tremendous support here, the letters that have been drafted of local officials, and hand deliver those, I think that would be effective. And so I'll put the word out, if you'll put the word out, have them draft letters, have them delivered to either you or to me, and then we'll set up a time to go back up to Washington and show the community support.
I'd be happy to join you as postal carrier, commissioners. So again, I thank you very much. And just so you know, Commissioner Daniels, when you were up in Washington, D.C., and you made all those visits, one of you sent me a collection of pictures, great pictures of your visits. I posted them on Facebook. Facebook took them down as on dishonest information or untruthful information. So just wanted you to know that. So thank you very much. And Commissioner Saunders, I'll work with you on that letter. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 10A. This is a recommendation to provide additional information to the Board of County Commissioners regarding the request for a partial refund of $141,540.90 for funds received to release a code enforcement lien with an accrued value of $167,500 in the code enforcement action titled Board of County Commissioners versus Krista L. Irizarry and Marshall John Irizarry relating to previously owned property located at 105 16th Street Southeast, Collier County, Florida. This item was brought to the agenda originally at Commissioner McDaniel's request and then the concurrence of the board. And Mr. Idana Marino is here to present and or answer questions at the board's pleasure.
Good morning. Tom Marino, Code Enforcement Director. This item was brought by Commissioner McDaniel to ask for additional information. We've provided some additional information. Obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Irizarry is asking for a lump sum of their money back from code liens that started back in 2010 and went all the way through 2016. Mr. Irizarry applied for code lien relief as per the resolution from last year. He applied for code lien relief in July of 2023 and ended up selling his house prior to being eligible for code lien relief. Since then, he has done quite a bit of work to push us into giving his money back, and I said, sir, I don't have a means to do that. The board resolution pretty much states that I can't give you your money back. It's up to the board to make that decision. So it's up to you guys to make that decision. The information that was provided to you is there. If you have questions, please ask away.
Commissioner McDaniel.
All right, I'll go first. This is not a new subject for us. He's emailed. I've seen you all being copied on the emails that have come forward. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances. I personally don't feel good about taking $167,000 from somebody because of a technicality. At the end of the day, there were a lot of family issues. There were a lot of health issues with the family. He had financial issues that forced him to have to sell his home, and that happened in the middle of the process while Commissioner LaCastro, which I support your enhancement of the code enforcement regulations and enhancement of the fines and so on and so forth. Mr. Irizarry got caught in the middle, for lack of a better term, and so I think a fair way. This is what the proposition is. We've been leaning on the 10% of the appraised value as the ultimate fee, and that is the difference between $167,500 and the proposal to reimburse him. The lien was out there and in effect and was taken out of the proceeds of his sale. And so we don't really have a process to go back and refund that. So this was the only real way that I could come up with to actually make that happen.
Commissioner Castro.
So he wouldn't be paying zero. He'd be paying the difference of 167, 141. So math in my head, 26 grand basically, or he'd go,
16,000, I think, is the.
I think it's the 26,000 roughly.
You're correct.
Correct
I'm sorry, my math was off. It's 100. It's about 26,000.
That would be the 10% of the appraised value at the time of his application in August or July of last year.
I mean, initially when I saw this yesterday, I didn't see that, or maybe I didn't put two and two together that it was the difference of the two. So I wasn't supportive of going from 167 to zero. You know, and one of the things I said when I made the proposal to tighten up fines, except in extenuating circumstances, and you filled in a little bit more on the blanks than what was on here, and I didn't dig deeper. I figured we'd talk about it here, but that's what I was looking for, was something in the middle. What we've told the Code Enforcement Board is if someone owes us $167,000 in the past, once they cut the tree and fixed the fence, then it went to zero. But realistically, the fine was there for a reason. And so if there's extenuating circumstances, that's what we want to hear. But, I get worried about precedent. Everybody comes in here and they have a, extenuating circumstance, and sometimes it's hard to fish through that. It helps when a commissioner maybe knows the case personally and can say, no, this isn't a guy crying wolf or whatnot. But I was hoping that the part in the middle would be a little bit more than just the difference, because that's a big jump or a big savings to him. But I don't know how the other commissioners feel. I was kind of on the fence about this one, and even when I hear it's $26K, that's a big discount. Because one thing we have to remember, this is taxpayer dollars. So this isn't we're penalizing him, but then this is money that he owes the county. It's not that we billed him for no reason. Do you have anything more to add?
I do, Commissioner. the case started in 2010. He had numerous opportunities to come into compliance. He didn't come into compliance until after about 60 inspections by the code inspectors going out there, repeatedly going to the property, up until 2016 when one code enforcement officer identified that the vehicles that were in violation are finally gone off the property. And we notified him that he's now no longer in abatement, no longer in violation. So staff did a lot of work on this property, and we didn't hear anything from him until July of 2023.
And that's the part I focus on. It's like, to me, and this may be maybe not the perfect example, so I'll make a more generic statement. When we do things like this and make 200,000 go to 0 or 200,000 go to 10, and the staff has done an unbelievable amount of work during these extenuating circumstances, I think it's really disrespectful to our county staff to just say, hey, thanks for going out there 50 times, but in the end, the guy didn't have to pay anything because, he filed a complaint or something. And like I said, maybe this one's a little bit, this one does have, maybe that's what we're trying to figure out. How extenuating are the circumstances? But one of the things that I had heard from you and your team is, this wasn't one that just slipped under the radar. And, sometimes we have fines that are adding up automatically, and the person's trying to do all they can, or the staff dropped the ball or something like that. And so it's sort of an artificial fine. I had heard this was one that the staff had really worked hard to try to work with him, even during the extenuating circumstances. So I have a little bit of a problem, giving him a gigantic discount and then telling the staff, hey, thanks for your attempts and everything. And especially when it goes back that far. If this is one that got really sloppy in the last 6 months, but this thing's been sitting on the council. No disrespect to the Commissioner McDaniel or his constituent, but I sort of look at this and go, these come before us quite often, and the precedent of if you told me, the staff didn't really do all that much. We went out there once, then we forgot about it. It fell through the crack and this and that. It's like, okay, sounds like some of the extenuating circumstances are on our side. It sounds like we spent a lot of taxpayer, salaries to get our staff on top of this one. And, I think part of the fine is to reimburse those efforts of our staff. So I don't think this is one I can support at $26K. I was, something sort of more in the middle and sort of split the difference or whatever, but, just, taking the appraisal fee, subtracting the amount, and it's like, hey, thanks. I think that spits in the face of the county staff when you do that, especially when you guys have worked so hard to try to address this one. But that's just me. I don't know, does this take a supermajority vote or it just takes majority? So I have a problem with it, and I like to be consistent in my votes. If this was somebody in my own district, I'd be making the same speech. So, in the extenuating circumstances, he gets a discount, but this one's, to me, is a little bit more major, so I can't support it at 26,000 or whatever it is.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. If you could go through, just for a few moments, what would have been the normal process to have the fines abated? And first, let me start with that. What would have been the normal process?
The normal process he would apply for code lien relief. He would have been in compliance with the resolution. He would have had all of his open permits on the property, which he still did have at the time up until May of just 2 months ago when they finally closed out the last permit. Had he been in complete compliance with everything, and had he been able to apply for the resolution, the 26,000 would have been the ultimate number, and it probably would have gone to consent, and you guys would have walked away with this a few months ago.
Okay, so if he had gone through the process, the staff's recommendation pursuant to our ordinance would have been a $26,000 fine based on the fair market value of the property at the time.
The assessed value of the property appraiser at the time, which is the 26 number that you're discussing, correct. Now, the other issue is that Mr. and Mrs. Irizarry apparently purchased this home, 2025 or 2005, I suspect, with a code violation on it that we didn't know about. When he sold this house, he sold the house stating that the house has current code violations because it has a garage, an unattached garage that's been illegally converted into living space. That has never been permitted in the first place.
Hang on one second, Tom. And Commissioner Colwell, if you'll mute yourself, we're backfeeding. We're hearing it coming through on you.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be slow like I was last.
That's all right. We'll let you catch up.
So part of the reason that the that they never were able to apply for the code lien relief is because there was an outstanding permit on a solar installation on the unpermitted garage conversion. Okay, so at this point in time, when he sold the house, he actually listed in the MLS that we're going to, this house is being sold with an unpermitted garage conversion. And since we found out about this whole process, we opened up a code case on the unpermitted garage conversion on the current new owners of the property. And they're working through that code case as we go through it.
So from your understanding of all of the facts, he didn't conceal the fact that there were code violations when he sold the property. And first of all, is that correct?
Yeah, from what I understand, he did not conceal that to the current owners when he conveyed it to the new property owners.
And if he went through the process today, the fine would have been $26,000 because of the assessed value on the property. So we're not treating him any differently than if he had come here 5 years ago with this.
Well, the resolution was different. The resolution just came out in May of last year, so prior to the resolution.
Okay, well then we're getting to a point where I wanted to get to.
Okay.
I want to make sure we're not treating him any differently than we would have treated him at that time. And so that's my question, is what would have been the process if he had done this in a timely fashion, and what would the fine have been if he did that in a timely fashion?
Yeah, I can't estimate what the fine would have been because that was a negotiated amount between the code enforcement director and the individual and the homeowner at the time, which is why the resolution was passed last year to take that off of the code enforcement and put it on the board to make that 10% across the or 20% depending on.
Okay, well then let me ask you a little bit different way then. Based on your knowledge of everything that's transpired from the time that this code violation was noted to today, with the changes in the ordinance, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation would have been, had he been in compliance, to do the $26,000 and been done with it.
Right. So we're not treating him any differently if we, in your view, if we do that today.
Mr. Commissioner, I think that.
I understand things have changed a little.
Right. Because of the conversations that we've had with him and our staff has had with him stating, sir, you need to contact an attorney. You don't just go ahead and sell this house right now because this resolution is here. We advised him to talk to counsel on his own to make sure that he's following his protocol so he protects himself. He never did that. He just sold the property on his own free will, hoping that he can get his money back on the back end. And I said, sir, I can't promise you that. You need to contact your counsel, make determinations on your own. And now he's asking for forgiveness on all that on the back end. And
I think I'm going to listen to some more discussion, but I think I kind of agree with the recommendation to reduce the fine. We've had the use of those funds for, how many years have we had those funds?
the check was cashed in September of last year.
Okay, so we've had the use of those funds for a year. That gives us some benefit, 4%, 3%, whatever. I don't think we're going to be treating him differently than we would if he was here today with the brand-new violation. And so I'm going to listen to what everybody else has to say, but I think I'm okay with this.
I have a question for you, Tom. Did Mr. Azari, he did not build the detached garage, but did he make it living quarters?
I don't believe he did. He says that he purchased the garage already converted.
Okay.
Now, he did add the solar panels and that system to it, and he put a new roof on it, and, he had permits for the new roof, he had permits for the solar panel. He put a new roof on his primary residence, and he had a permit for that at the same time, so,
So was the only violation the stuff in the yard?
The nuisance abatement, all the unlicensed, unregistered vehicles and a bunch of stuff in the yard, some boats and stuff. He had gotten rid of a few things to begin with, but there was still a handful of things that he just didn't part with.
I mean, I understand hardship, but I don't understand hardship for 6 years. And is there something in the ordinance that says if it's ongoing, it's not 10%, it's 20%?
That's if it's multiple violations that have been repeat violations, and this doesn't, it was just
Okay.
one violation. It wasn't,
I just remembered something about that. That's what I wanted to ask.
you're close, but right on it.
And it's a tough situation for me because at the same time, we have an ordinance that says the 10%. But I don't want people out there thinking we can just do what we want to do, because in the end, it's only going to cost us 10%. You know, if sin has consequences, and so does breaking the law. And I don't want to, you know, I do have compassion, and I'm not leaning one way or the other. I just want to make some comments about my thoughts. If we give him, you know, if we take $26,000, that's a pretty big sting. How much of the $167,000 was actual penalties, like the $100 a day stuff?
167,000.
So it was just because of time, not because of actual.
He failed to come into compliance for 6 years, and it was the accumulation of that $100 a day for 6
I mean, that's a lot of money. $100 a day is a lot of money, so.
And he was, when he came to hearing to the Code Enforcement Board, he asked for an extension of time to come into compliance. The board gave him 180 days, 6 months to come into compliance, and he still didn't come into compliance at that time after coming to a board hearing. You know, so in my opinion, he knew
Oh, sure, he
what
did.
everything was,
No,
and you know, and then after he came into, after compliance hit in 2016, he had until 2023 to try to close the case out and pay off whatever he finds he could and negotiate what he could at that time. Only until he sold the house is when he started asking for forgiveness.
And he sold the house, and the new people, they bought it knowing that they had an issue with it. So it's not like.
Correct.
It's not like he just sold his problem.
Correct. He sold the home. He disclosed, as required by law, that there were code violations on the house, that it was unpermitted built-out unattached garage. So they bought knowing what they were buying.
Good, thank you. Commissioner McDaniel.
Let me help you a little bit. This is one that got caught in the middle. There were extenuating circumstances. I haven't gone into all of the detail. You don't get to pick and choose when you sell your house. When you're in a tight, you got to sell your house. And you got to sell your house when the buyer's standing there wanting to buy the house. You don't necessarily have time to go get legal counsel and figure out all of this stuff. The lien is real. We collected the funds. Commissioner LaCastro, if it weren't for you, he would be getting off for court costs $1,800. That's a insult to our staff. That what was happening in the past was an insult to our staff and our taxpayers for the expenditure of the tax funds and the time that we spent taking care of these things. So if it hadn't been for you, we'd be riding along taking $1,800 from somebody like this, and that'd be it. And that's about what it was. I mean, I settled, I don't know how many outstanding code compliance issues before Tom came along for a couple $1,000, $180,000, $200,000 in compliance issues that somebody got cited on and never did. The other extenuating fact that you have to remember is in Golden Gate Estates, especially in rural Golden Gate Estates, what I do within the four corners of my piece of property is my business, and you, the government, had not to be coming in there. And if I decide I want to keep unregistered vehicles on my property, I'm going to do it. It's not right. It's outside of the ordinance. It's outside of the laws of our community. But there is an attitude out there. Then we get into the unpermitted living structure that was there. How many of them are out there? My goodness. I report a camper a week. Somebody's illegally I don't want to say it. Well, it is illegal. It's against our ordinance. You're not allowed to rent a camper in Golden Gate Estates. So, Mr. Izziari knew he was in violation, didn't take care of it. There were health issues there that I don't really want to get into here. There were extenuating circumstances that were in fact going on, and I think had he not had to sell his house because of an illness and the financial constraints that were put upon him, he would have went through the normal process. We would have treated him equally as we are now for the 10% of the assessed valuation, and this would have, as Tom said, this would have been under the consent agenda. There were extenuating circumstances that caused him to have to sell, that caused us to then collect on the lien. So, again, I'm not I'm not lobbying for someone who has effectively broken our laws. What I'm doing is trying to treat everyone equally, thanking Commissioner LaCastro for moving us to the place where we are now, where there is some teeth in our codes and in our ordinances, which it needs to in fact be, and cure an ill that transpired because of circumstances outside of our normal control.
Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. When I read this particular item on the agenda, it struck me it was different than what we typically see here. I know that I've been here my second year on the board, but in the past, we've always seen these come before us was when the new owner had purchased the property and is looking for a, lenience on this because they weren't the one that actually caused the issue or had the issues with the county. It was the prior owner. And they're just trying to make themselves whole and fix the problems and try to get a discount on what transpired. But this was unique. I mean, I understand, my colleague talking about illnesses and situations, personal life situations. I don't know that Tom, if you correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it seems like for 6 years somebody must have turned them in at one point for having these unregistered vehicles, and then, of course, the county and county code enforcement did their job. They went out and investigated the complaint and found violations. And from what I understand, this $167,000 is just because he had a bunch of unregistered cars on his property. And you guys know me, this might sound harsh, but just because your zip code doesn't make you're above the law. All right. We all have to stay within the lines or we have chaos. I don't know if he's been sick for 6 years. I don't know the personal issues, but he could have got a tow truck there a long time ago and took care of this problem when he was asked to do it. And I think the property was purchased in 2005. Am I correct?
I believe so, sir, yes.
So he sold it in 2023. So I can probably guarantee you made a heck of a profit on that property, regardless of advertising the code violations to the new seller. It's almost like he like kind of snubbed his nose to us until the end, and then now he's like saying, well, I want to make my full profit on my property that I got diminished because I had to advertise it as having code liens. And that's on him. That's totally on him and no one else. He had 6 years to fix it, and he just chose not to. So I'm kind of like what Commissioner LaCastro. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied at the $25,959.10. I think this probably requires a little more of a lesson because it just, I lived out in the estates when I first moved over 20 years ago to Collier County. I had a 2.5 acre lot way out on 56th Ave Northeast. But you know what? If I did something wrong or I was turned in by code enforcement because my boat didn't have its registration on it, you know what? I fixed it. I took care of the problem before it became a problem. So that's just what you're supposed to do. And, I'm not going to make excuses, but I'm pretty sure when he sold this house, he had an opportunity to sell it before, and I don't know his circumstances, but you're saying a guy standing before him want to buy the house, you got to buy it and got to sell it right now. I don't know if that's even comes into play here when you have 6 years to rectify the problem. I mean, I know it would have been a lot cheaper to hire a tow truck, come in and drag them cars out of there than getting fined $100 a day. And then after the fact, you didn't make a big enough profit on the sale of your house. Now you want to get your money back. So I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the 25,959. I think there's another number maybe, but that's the way I feel.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just add a couple of fine points as to why I'm still not comfortable with it. First of all, the length of time. You know, if it was a tighter time frame where he's sick and, you know, everything was more compressed, but, you know, Commissioner Colwell said it better than me. You know, you make a phone call, you get a tow truck, you do it. I think he knew he was always going to sell the property. And we said when we put more teeth in the ordinance, you can't unload the property for sale. And then all of a sudden, even if you advertise it, the new owner says, oh, it wasn't my problem. And the old owner says, well, you know, it is what it is. I can appreciate what Commissioner McDaniel is saying is the unique attitude of some of the people in Golden Gate. The reality is it doesn't supersede the law. So, you know, if I had a unique attitude in East Naples, I'd still be on the hook for this.
You do have a unique attitude.
Yeah, and I would still pay. The one thing I'll correct you with, Tom, if 26K was on the consent agenda, it wouldn't automatically be approved, and the reason being is I would have pulled it off. So the consent agenda isn't a rubber stamp approval, as you know, and I know you weren't inferring that, but we would still be talking about it because it would have jumped out at me as, you know, hey, another person who sold their home is looking for a discount. And like Commissioner Cole said, he may have a hardship and health and whatnot, but I bet he profited handsomely from the property. The 10% also, that's not an automatic. That's a guideline. We can negotiate anything. And so when someone owes us $500,000, even though the 10% is in there as a guideline, it comes to the board because we could say, well, you know, the situation wasn't that extenuating. Circumstances weren't that unique or extenuating. And so, you know, the 10% is a drop in the bucket for this. I'll just go on record say I'm not going to vote for this for anything under 50K. I think it should be twice the 25 and change. So 50K, I'd sleep better at night and feel like the taxpayers got their money back and we were consistent to send a message that says, you know what, when you kind of move slow and, you know, your grass is too long or the cars don't get moved or whatever. And, you know, we weren't asking them to build the Empire State Building or to remove it. These were things that could have been fixed in 6 years. We set a really bad precedent if we just default to the 10% and go, great, wonderful, because I think you're going to be at this podium multiple times from people that all have the same view. And I'm not here to ask you, you know, your opinion. This is the vote of the board, so I wouldn't put you in the spot and say, what should we do? I just want you to tell us the facts, and you've outlined the facts, which were the length of time, and, you know, this wasn't something that was an over-the-top fix type of thing. So if somebody made a motion and say to collect, and I'd even make it, I'll agree to 50,000, not a penny less. And if there's a motion that it's going to be 49.9, it won't get my vote. And I think that's still fair. He still gets a discount. He can pay for it with the profits of his property. And, you know, I do think he could have taken care of this way, way in advance. And that's the whole message of us tightening up, you know, this ordinance. So I guess, unless somebody has other comments, I'll make a motion that we reduce his fee to 50,000 even, and I would approve that.
And I will second it. And just to say, the system already worked. At closing, they withheld this money and gave the money to the county. So it's not like he's going to keep it. We still have to cut him a check now for $50,000 from the taxpayers' money.
Correction, I think just to confirm your motion is to retain 50,000 and return
117.
the remaining.
Yeah, return less.
I'm going to trust your judgment from the personal information that you have. I know that you wouldn't be so passionate about it if there wasn't some truth to it. But at the same time, I don't want to sting this guy for $167,000, and I'm going to agree with the 50. I think he would have had time. You know, people do what they want to do. And in hindsight, looking back, it's easy. I don't doubt that there was extenuating circumstances. I don't doubt that he had to sell his house. I don't doubt that he had health issues. But for 6 years, during the problem, I think that there was some effort he could have had to take care of those things. And I'm going to agree with the 50,000. I think that's enough to make a statement, not only to him, but to the public coming forward. If you have code things, no matter what's going on in your life, you can make a phone call, a text. You can do something to let us know that you're trying. And with that, Commissioner McDaniel.
It's me. If it's the will of the board for 50,000, it's the will of the board. I can count noses. I'm not going to sit over here and lobby for somebody who wasn't complying with our code. Right now, Mr. Izziari loses $167,500. It's already gone. So giving back minus the 50 is something I can share with you. And again, I'm not lobbying for anything other than I can share with you there were health circumstances, not only his own, but his family. There were financial circumstances that caused duress with his father, things he had to take. And again, these aren't excuses. Commissioner Colwell, we've all been there. How easy would it be to get a record to come and take care of your stuff? Bottom line, the motion's made 50. I think we've belabored this circumstance long enough. So I think because of the extenuating circumstances, because had he not got caught in having to sell his house when he sold his house because of the financial duress and the illness that was going on with his family, he would have got dinged for the 10%, and this would have been on down the road, which was the avenue that I was coming back with here. But we can all sit around and talk about what we would have done if we would have done it. And if you think, again, right now he's out $167,500. So if it's the will of the board to do, and again, if it's the will of the board to do the 50, let's giddy up.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. Just two quick points. I agree with the $50,000. I think that's a fair number. But I will say that I will always ask staff for their opinion. I may not always agree with it, but we got a professional staff, and I rely on your opinion. So it's not just simply asking your opinion and going along with it without any questioning of it. So I don't mind putting you on the spot. I will always do that.
Well, okay, I guess I'll answer it then. My opinion is that staff did a lot of work on this over the years. Staff advised Mr. Irizarry of what he should and shouldn't do. Contact counsel. An attorney's not that expensive when it comes to $167,000 if you're just asking for a couple hours of advice. And if to me, he didn't do that. He relied on the generosity of county staff to hope that he'd be able to get something on the back end. And
he is.
And I get that, but as I would impose the $167,500 as I would any other case that we had before the Code Enforcement Board or before the Special Magistrate. I would do the same for you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to withhold the 50,000 and to return the 117 and change. So all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 11A. And this is a recommendation to approve and adopt a resolution authorizing the condemnation of those fee simple and easement interest necessary for the construction of roadway drainage and utility improvements required for the extension of Vanderbilt Beach Road from 16th Street Northeast to Everglades Boulevard. Mr. Jay Ahmad, your Transportation Engineering Division Director, is here to present or answer questions.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jay Ahmad with Transportation Engineering for the record. I'll be happy to present or answer any question.
I think we understand it.
Yeah, it seemed like a no-brainer after.
And just to clarify, this is just something that is going to establish our right to condemn property. It's not our intent to do that, but it's just a formality that says that if we get to that point, then we can.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir. We have about 5 to 6 months to continue negotiating with the property owners and to meet project schedule by late next year, 2025. We would have to get into litigation and through our county attorney and through the court system.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yeah, do you have a picture?
Yes.
Just and again, we're all extremely familiar with the grid system that's going on in eastern Collier County, the interchange efforts at Everglades and I-75, of the lack of grid system that this community has had for 20 years. And this is, to us, this is semantics. This is us setting up the precedent. We approved this 17 some odd million 2 months ago to move forward with the right-of-way acquisitions. This just sets the stage for the acquisition in the event that there's litigation. And it's important that people actually know about this. I was listening to the radio this morning, and you know, there were a couple of people that were calling in and chirping about the growth and the lack of infrastructure, but they're not really aware of what's in fact going on, that we do now have a grid system that's in place, that we do now have a plan within our long-range transportation plan itself that delineates how we're going to be able to move people around better. So I just thank you for showing the picture. I'll make a motion for approval because, again, we're all aware it's semantics, but I wanted to say out loud that there is a plan that is in fact going on, and this, by having this mechanism in place, this allows us to move into litigation, condemnation, in the fact that we run into a property owner that's not interested in negotiating fairly.
Yes, sir. And as you know, the Vanderbilt Beach Road Extension Phase 1, which from Collier to 16th is under construction, and we hope to be done by late 2025 or so. And so this will be a continuation of that all the way to Everglades Boulevard.
Correct.
Right. So we have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 11B. This is the recommendation to authorize the county attorney to advertise for future consideration an ordinance amending Chapter 74 of the Collier County Code of Laws and Ordinances, which is the Collier County Consolidated Impact Fee Ordinance, providing for the incorporation by reference the impact fee study, amending the water and wastewater impact fee rate schedule, providing for an effective date of December 1st, 2024, in accordance with the 90-day notice requirement set forth in Section 163.31801-4D Florida statutes, and providing for revised definitions and update of the provisions related to the adoption and collection of impact fees. Mr. Joe Ballone, your Director of Utilities Finance, is here to begin the presentation.
Thank you, County Manager. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Joe Ballone, Director, Utilities Finance. Today I'm going to give you an overview of our most recent water sewer impact fee study and discuss the role that impact fees play related to the provision of new capacity expansion. The utilities expansion plans are aligned with the strategic objective to plan and build public infrastructure to effectively, efficiently, and sustainably meet the needs of our community. This study is has a basis in the 2023 AUIR, which included capacity expansion dictated by population growth using the BEBA numbers and the interactive growth model. The agenda today includes the topics you see on the slide that are related to the water and wastewater impact fee rate study that was completed by Raftelis, our rate consultants. I have Justin Razor here. Is that not? Sorry. Push down. There we go. Okay. Justin Razor is here from Raftelis. Today, should you have any questions at the end of the presentation. And again, the purpose today is to convey to you, the governing board of the Water Sewer District, and to the constituents and anyone listening, about the critical nature of this study and the fiscal sustainability of the utility into the future to meet expected demand for utility services that growth is creating. Come on. There we go. Purpose of impact fees. These were water and sewer were last updated. The rate study was updated in 2019. They had an effective date of March of 2020. Impact fees are updated regularly. We try to do that every 3 years or whenever business conditions warrant. Impact fees have historically supported the policy of growth paying for growth where legally permitted. This study includes the current local construction costs, updating those from 4 years ago. We all know what happened in the last 4 years. And those meet the impact fee guidelines for using the nexus for using local data. We all know that water and wastewater capacity must be designed and constructed in advance of the demand. And to do that, the utility must bond these projects to ensure that the appropriate funding is in place. Due to the long lead times for design and construction of these capacity projects, impact fee rate study includes a 10-year capital planning horizon to ensure that the funding is in place timely. There we go. It's slow today. Excuse me, commissioners. Let's talk just a bit about enterprise fund revenues. The Water Sewer District, and I'll refer to them as the district from time to time, is an enterprise fund, and as such, there are no general fund or tax revenues to support the utility, and they rely solely on user fees and impact fees. Just going to remind you, though, we're not talking about user fees today. They do provide for day-to-day operation of the utility and its routine maintenance. We also use them for the critical repair and rehabilitation and replacement capital projects, and to fund those to replace aging infrastructure that has reached the end of its useful life. And we do transfer to pay user fee debt obligations and to fund statutory reserves. So today what we're talking about is the impact fee rate study. So current users of the utility, our current customers, are not really affected by this rate study or its implementation. Impact fees, on the other hand, really only affect new customers that are connecting to the system, that is, as when they're buying new homes. They pay for new or additional capacity infrastructure. Those would be production and treatment plants, as well as the large transmission mains that bring the raw water to the water plant and take the wastewater from the homes to the wastewater treatment plant. Impact fees fund reserves to meet bond covenants, and they are pledged to meet the growth-related debt service. There we go. A utility expansion plan and its relation to the strategic plan priorities. These capacity expansion plans and those needs are identified in the 2023 AUIR, and we'll see those specifics on the next slide. They're in line with the 2024 strategic plan priorities and objectives. And obviously, the expansion plans that we're discussing enable the district to provide potable drinking water and wastewater treatment to produce irrigation quality water that will meet the future demand that we're facing. In the 2023 AUIR, the district identified specific growth-related capacity expansion projects that are contemplated within the 10-year planning horizon. Included in that was a 4 million gallon a day wastewater reclamation facility that's located on the current, will be located on the current Golden Gate City plant site, and that stated would be online in 2027. So that's the most immediate need we're facing. In addition, there will be a 4 MGD wastewater reclamation facility, be located on the northeast utility site, and the plans were to have that online in 2030. And finally, there would be a 10 million water treatment facility also located on the northeast utility site, and that would be online in 2033, along with any of the appropriate raw water wells and transmission mains, et cetera, necessary to feed that plant. We talk about the Golden Gate site, but the Golden Gate Water Reclamation Facility will become the central Collier regional facility. It will be the 3rd regional facility in our utility. It will not only serve new sewer customers as we move forward with plans for septic to sewer conversion that are being developed, but also relieve the south plant to divert flows coming from growth in the southeast and all the activity in Activity Center 9. Just a few examples of impact fee funded projects. And if you've driven around Golden Gate City, you'll see these. You see here the transmission pipe, the potable water transmission pipe installation in Golden Gate City. This ongoing impact fee funded project will benefit the residents of Golden Gate City to provide potable drinking water, thus eliminating the wells that are in close proximity to septic systems, as well as enhanced fire protection capabilities as we add fire hydrants throughout this project. Another example, Commissioners, again, in terms of your strategic priorities, is the Northeast Utility expansion. You'll see here the ground storage tanks. They are part of the permanent utility infrastructure on the NISA site. Those were built with impact fee revenues. Currently, we are building 2 deep injection wells. You approved that just a few meetings ago. Those will be online in 2 and 2.5 years from now, and they're required to be online so that they are available when the permanent treatment facility is constructed. And as I mentioned before, the NISA site will also be home to the 4 MGD permanent wastewater treatment reclamation facility. Again, reminding you, they'll be online in 2030, and the 10 MGD water treatment facilities we expect to come online in 2033. The proposed Northeast developments, growth in the Northeast service area of the county, will also create demand for additional capacity. The district has board-approved utility service agreements with several villages and towns. We'll talk about those on the next slide. Here we go. The agreements we have with Skysail, Rivergrass Village, Town of Big Cypress, Belmar Village, and Brightshore Village. If you add those up, agreements will provide service to 12,500 residential units and approximately 1,768,000 square feet of commercial properties. Those agreements are already in place. We're working, and current agreements are currently in process. That'll add an additional 10,000 residential units as well as commercial properties with Horse Trials, Collier Rod and Gun Club, and Hogan Island Town. Just an additional note here, Commissioners, is all of these, we're building this capacity so that we're able to add future customers, and those customer connections to the district's infrastructure really represent a future revenue stream of user fees, and we can utilize those to fund operations and maintenance of those new facilities, as well as capital projects to rehabilitate aging infrastructure anywhere in the utility system as those assets reach the end of their useful life. It's been quite a extensive review of the rate study thus far. We've had legal review throughout the development of the study and at its final report with our bond counsel from Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson. We've taken the study to the DSAC Utility Subcommittee, reviewed in detail with three gentlemen. We did that back in March, and they concluded that the study be endorsed and to move it to full DSAC. We presented those to the DSAC at their April meeting, and the motion they made was to include the recommendation to move it forward to you for review. We also did visit with the CBIA at their offices to discuss the study's recommendations, and we did that back in May. As you know, water and sewer impact fees are one or two pieces of the large pie of impact fees that are assessed in Collier County. But impact fees actually represent an investment in the future. You can see that water and sewer independently represent 12% of the total. Those would increase, all else equal. We know that other impact fee rate studies are in process, but the pieces of the pie for water and sewer obviously will increase as we move forward, if you move forward with this today. Just again, a reminder that water and sewer services are essential, life-sustaining services, which we believe future residents, businesses, and visitors not only demand but expect. The chart will depict the current or the existing impact fees for water and wastewater, the proposed fees, and the difference in total would be $5,388. It's a large percentage. $5,000 on $7,000 is a large percentage. Theoretically, it's not a large dollar value. And we've always included in that for our residential master metered communities, sort of a scale for smaller units paying about a third of the full impact fee, those between 751 and 1,500 square feet, but 2/3 of the fee and anything 1,500 square feet, single-family residential and above represent full boat, 100% of the fees. This chart, Commissioners, obviously your eye is probably drawn to the red line. That was done purposely so you know what we're recommending. But if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'd like to take you from the left side of that chart to the right. The dollars are above, but below I have sort of a timeline so you can see how impact fees increased and decreased based on business conditions. So the very left side of the chart at the bottom, you'll see that in the early 2000s, we bought the Northeast Utility site, and we're in the planning process and design for building both the water and the wastewater plants on the Northeast site. 2008, we all know what happened. The recession hit. Those capacity expansion projects were put on hold. They moved out of the 10-year planning horizon. Impact fees came down. And here we are today. We started to expand the district 2019. And we know where we are today. Not only are demands increasing for incremental capacity, but they're also the construction costs since we updated the last water and sewer impact fee rates based on the 2019 rate study. The last 4 years, construction costs have increased dramatically. And as we agreed, I mean, we had this discussion at the DSAC meeting in April, and should capacity planning change or move out of the 10-year horizon, obviously we'll do a rate study update. Thank you, Justin. And we will look at impact fees going forward as business conditions change. So commissioners, as the district's financial officer, you can see the recommendation is stated in the executive summary before you. I, along with staff, are recommending acceptance of the study's conclusions and recommendations. We're asking you to authorize the county attorney to advertise this impact fee ordinance for consideration and adoption at the August 23rd BCC meeting. And I will reiterate my message about the criticality of this study as it affects the fiscal sustainability of the utility in the future to meet the expected demand that growth has created. And with that, Commissioners, I will open the floor to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes. Let's back up a slide.
Sure.
First off, do we have any public speakers?
We have one.
Okay. You want to go to them first, and then we can have our deliberations?
Danielle Hudson, who I startled.
She's a hired gun. We got to get her in and out of here because. Oh, you don't have to run. They don't pay you enough. Oh.
Get my exercise in. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Danielle Hudson. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy at the Naples Area Board of Realtors, and we are here today to speak in opposition to the 80.5% increase in water and wastewater impact fees. We've been here before in 2019 when the County Commission was suggesting increasing impact fees. Our then president and now State House Representative Lauren Mello asked a very simple question, and the question was, to quote her, "If we want to provide housing for service personnel, why would we increase the cost of housing in Collier County?" Commissioners, we have a circular conversation in this county regarding workforce and attainable housing. As an industry, we sit on focus groups where we attempt to solve for the spider web of factors that impact housing affordability. At the same time, across the country, families are having to make difficult decisions and adjustments to their budgets as costs increase. So our question is simple. Can we at least have a robust discussion on controlling expenses or potentially adjusting the Commission's budgets or the county's budgets to offset this increase before we place even more of a burden on housing affordability making housing even more out of reach for the workforce that we are attempting to solve for their housing needs right now. That's our request. We thank you for your consideration.
Now can I go?
Sure, go ahead.
I lost my turn. The issue, housing affordability, as Danny brought up, is an ongoing circumstance. I want to say out loud, I want you to say out loud that there are no plans for septic to sewer conversion in Golden Gate Estates rural.
There are no plans for septic to sewer conversion in rural
Golden Gate
Estates.
Thank you. We were always up here separating rumor from fact, and it got on the interweb that from somebody that works in utilities that we're going to hook everybody up to water and sewer in Golden Gate Estates. In 2006, Commissioner Collier anointed me to be chair of the East of 951 Horizon Study, and there was a prophecy then of connection to Golden Gate Estates, and it was like $100,000 per house to extend utilities to those folks, and there certainly was no need. Number one. Number two, the expense was extraordinary. So just I'm going to lay that one to rest at this particular point. Number two, Golden Gate City, on the other hand, Commissioner Saunders, you and I were on the board when we acquired that utility and know of the health issues that are existent in a 6-unit per acre subdivision, largely on septic and well. You have to be 75 feet away from somebody else's septic system for your own water supply. And so potable water in that community is imperative. That's the less expensive extension to take care of the health of that community. The more expensive extension is the wastewater coming away, and that will take some time over as we go forward. Number three, I'm a data junkie. I want data all of the time, and one of the first things that I did was I commissioned a study on the water quality from eastern Collier County all the way out, where the canals in fact all start, all the way in, and that I had actually brought forward a resolution to suggest that we mandate that new construction go to the highest and best technology, not particularly any particular manufacturer, but we all know there are septic systems now that create drinkable water. I wouldn't do it, but I've seen the video where the guy drinks from an active septic tank. He takes a cup of water and drinks off of it, but that,
He had a white beard.
and was good looking. So the costs are going up. There's no argument the costs are going up, but we're all right now suffering from consequences of decision makers. This timeline right here shows what's in fact going on. That land where the Northeast Regional Wastewater Water Facility is in fact going in was bought by the county in 2000. It was permitted up to 90% by 2004 and then set aside because of what was deemed the Great Recession. And when I came into office in 2016, we had storage tanks for wastewater at our south plant that we couldn't take offline for fear of a disruption to our current ratepayers. We couldn't take offline to do PM, preventative maintenance. We couldn't do what was necessary to take care of the community that we already have, let alone knowing there's more coming. So yes, the Northeast facility will provide for services for that future growth that will come in the next 20 years over time. They're not going to be here tomorrow. But on the same token, it is a relief valve. Am I mistaken? Is the Northeast plant already interconnected with the systems that we already have in place?
The northeast, we have the interim wastewater facility on the northeast site, and yes, that would be connected to the regional system.
Ultimately, they'll all three be connected to provide service for all of our community. It's important that people understand we as a government are obligated to the property owners to extend utilities when someone comes forward. That's part of our growth management plan. They have a right to pay their impact fees, and they have a right to receive the services that are there. So it's the Northeast system will provide the necessary duplication that is requisite for us. And I keep pointing to Dr. George. He's sitting in the back not saying anything right now, but he and I have had lengthy conversations with regard to this. It will provide the duplication that's necessary for us to be able to maintain the quality of services that our utility, which is one of the best in the nation, will continue to provide. I don't want to get caught up in the extraordinary expense. I do want to say out loud that I'm concerned about this extraordinary increase all at once. I would like to see some data and analysis with regard to a potential of phasing in this fee increase over a period of time. No one knows necessarily what the economy is going to do. No one knows what interest rates are going to, in fact, do. No one knows what our borrowing capacity is going to be based upon what's, in fact, going to transpire in the future. So before I make a final approval of this, I would like to see a 2-year phase plan. I would like to see a 3-year phase plan. And then I'd like that to be weighed against the risks associated with extending out the fee increase over a period of time. Where we're at with our CIE, our capital improvement element, where we're at with our AUIR, which then leads into the 5-year CIE. I would like to see what the planned capital expenses are before we make a final, before we pull a trigger on this. It's there's no argument. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's no argument that costs are going up every single day. But on the same token, as was mentioned, we do have affordability issues, have had for quite some time. The other side of the equation is we have to have the necessary revenues in order to move forward.
Correct.
So if I'll be quiet for a minute until I regather.
Commissioner, the data that you want, just a piece, just so that you have it, since we had a speaker from NABOR. From the NABOR site, the average home price in 2020, which is the last time impact fees are updated, average median home price in Collier County in 2020 was $425,000. According to the May statistics published by NABOR, May of 2024, the average home price, single-family home price, is $850,000 in Collier County.
And
I don't think we can attribute all of that.
And that's not all due to, that's not all due to impact fees.
No,
Just for the record.
that's due to Freedom Town, USA.
Exactly.
You know, to the public, growth is a bad word. I mean, it's, you know, they immediately put growth to traffic, which we have our traffic issues. But growth is not necessarily a burden. It's also a benefit. Just as you mentioned, there's extra revenue coming from it. We're talking about adding 22,000 plus residential units out east and in the future, and that's a lot of people. But at the same time, what people need to realize is they're not just going to live out there and then drive all the way into where we have existing businesses to eat and buy their groceries and buy their gas. There's going to be over 1 million square feet of commercial out there where they're going to be able to get their services without having to come in. And so that's a positive thing. I can definitely support the need and the discussion for a phased-in approach. I think the 80%, I think the ultimate figure is going to be needed for our growth. The numbers don't lie. But whether we need to jump it in there all at the same time seems to, I think that warrants a good discussion amongst us. As far as affordability, the impact fees are not going to make an affordable house unaffordable. Those discussions can, as projects come forward, we can talk about that. But we don't necessarily have to say all affordable projects are going to pay this figure, because those things are going to come to us on a case-by-case basis, that we can make decisions to keep those projects affordable. And that's a high priority of mine as well. But overall, what are you thinking, Commissioner McDaniel, as far as making the decision on this? So you want to see the data come back for just a future meeting?
Yeah. Okay. Well, because right now we're advertising an ordinance to come up, and to be advertised and then ultimately adopted. So in order to, I think, for us to make a good decision, we need to weigh the impacts of the increase in relationship to the needs that are in fact in place. We have an AUIR, we have a 5-year CIE. They know what our capital exposures in fact are. They don't know what the cost associated, the risk associated with borrowing in relationship to the revenue stream in fact is. And so I'd like to see that weighed against the necessities that are there before we make a final decision as to whether we go forward or not.
I can buy in on that. Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. Joe, just a couple of quick questions. As we discussed yesterday in my office with you and your team, I have grave concerns about the 80% jump. Commissioner McDaniel was talking about a phased-in approach, but in my office you said that was the plan already. Was that just going to be the recommendation, or you already have a plan to propose to us a phase-in and it wouldn't be an immediate jump to 80? It was something it sounded, in my office, you said that was already the plan.
Well,
So
the recommendation actually was a full implementation, as the ordinance is written that's attached, is full implementation for those recommended rates to become effective on December 1st of 2020.
Oh, with no phase-in?
With no phase-in.
Oh. So maybe what you said in my office is we could phase it in when we were just talking back and forth. Was that our conversation yesterday that, you all had given some thought? So if our direction, because I agree with Commissioner McDaniel, but I thought we had that conversation yesterday, and maybe you said we could phase it in, right?
We could. And just as an example, I put a couple of quick figures together this morning. If you did a 2-year implementation, say 50% December 1st and 50% next year, that would represent a 40% increase versus the 80%. If you did a 3-year phase-in, that would represent 27%, or a $1,796.
Yeah. So see, I hate that less than
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the 2-year would be $2,690 all in, water and sewer together. A 2-year phase-in represent an increase of $2,694 versus $5,388.
Let me ask you about this slide here, just for historical purposes. So, of course, things have changed in the last couple of years when it comes to expenses, and so that's why there's such a significant jump. But, you go back to this slide in 2005, and, you look at the dollar percent change, and it's, it's in the single digits or low 2 digits. And then, of course, and you've already explained that, over the last couple of years, a lot of things have changed since 2005. But explain to me, if you look at the top of the slide, it has the years. So, in 2005, here's the numbers. 2006, here's the numbers. 2007. So, every year those numbers, and maybe this is just the sample. Maybe there's stuff in the middle, and just for the sake of showing the trend, you've made this slide. But my initial takeaway when I saw this slide is, former commissioners looked at it in 2005. They looked at it in 2006. They looked at it in 2007. They looked at it in 2008. Then for some reason they skipped a few years and they jumped to 2011, then 2015, then 2017, then 2019, then 2024. So it was like, were they looking at it every year, and then it went to 3 years, then it went to 2 years, now it's 5 years? Is there data in the middle that's missing, and this is just sort of a sample size, or every year this was talked about?
So Yes, sort of to
Yeah.
all of that. So there's a long history with the impact fee program and the way that the studies were handled. When you look at those earlier years, the 2005, 2006, 2007, we were in a high growth environment, and we had a board that was aggressively pursuing a capital program on the heels of the late 90s and a lot of the 90s where we didn't build anything. Hit a crisis point in 2000 with capacity for water and sewer as well as transportation. So we not only had the requirement to update impact fees every 3 years, we were actually indexing them in the mid-year. So we were looking at the impact fees every single year. In 2006, the specific statutory guidance on impact fees was implemented, and that started to change the way that we did things. So we were still looking at the 3-year cycles, but the legislature was starting to put more controls around what we could do. Fast forward then, in the recessionary period, Collier County approached their impact fees actually differently than a lot of other places that either completely had moratoriums, which was interesting because with no building permits, a moratorium doesn't do anything. You're not collecting any money anyway. Or they sat on their fees at the place that they basically were frozen in time, which would have been a high growth environment. And Collier County continued to adjust their fees down because the equity of the system is that the impact fee should reflect the true cost, and therefore if costs are up, they go up, but if costs go down, they go down. And so that you'll see the downturn there. So we started picking the studies back up, but we had stayed on this 3-year cycle, and we've now had the ability for indexing essentially completely removed. And when you're starting to see these longer gaps in time between the studies, has a lot to do with getting our arms around changes at the legislative level, at the state level, and making sure that we conform. The picture moving forward is going to look a lot different. Other than utilities who right now stand away from most of the statutory provisions, the legislature dictates how often we can increase the fees, how we're going to increase the fees. The phase-in becomes basically automatic, and the board has very little that they can do without extenuating circumstances, supermajority votes, and additional public hearings to trump those statutory requirements. So that's what's happened. You're going to hear a lot more about this when we bring the rest of the impact fee program forward to bring it into compliance with statute. But you'll see we'll continue to update the utilities impact fees as long as the way that we have every 3 years, as long as we can. But indexing is done. We won't be making those annual visits anymore because of those requirements of statute.
I mean, I might be misunderstanding you, but it would seem that because these fees have the potential that if there is a big shift in the economy or expenses or what have you, as there has been recently, this can affect the homeowner significantly. Yes, everybody's happy their home value's doubled, but this is still, real money, and boom, just like Ms. Hudson said, it's 80%. Wow, it really jumps out at you. I mean, I would think we would want to aggressively look at this every single year the way they did back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, and not have these big jumps. And to your point, it sounded like the staff is looking at it every year, but I mean, for it to come up here every year, is that our plan going forward or no?
You're preempted by the legislature.
Okay.
So there is no more. I mean, utilities has a little bit of wiggle room because they're exempt from certain portions of statute, but otherwise the statute tells us when and how we can do things
Got it.
exactly, up to and including caps on how much we can increase the fees without, again, an extraordinary circumstance and a supermajority vote of the board, as well as additional hoops. Now, not to say we wouldn't pursue that, but there's really no path forward to how we were managing the impact fee program in the mid-2000s. Now we'll do the best we can, and we're committed still to maintaining that equity. So again, if we go into a situation where you're in a down economy, it doesn't mean that we're going to sit here and keep these fees artificially high. That's part of the argument for what we've done, is that we treat the program fairly, not just to our advantage, is that if things are expensive, it reflects in the impact fees. But as costs come down, we feel that it's important that the studies reflect that as well.
So all 11B is doing is exactly what it says. We're voting here to recommend that the county attorney can advertise this as I don't want to say a possibility, but as the proposal. But I think in the advertisement, I agree with Commissioner McDaniel, there should be some language in there that we're considering, or we're going to, or whatever the proper language is on phasing, if that matters, you know,
If we're
at this
gonna
early juncture.
You advertise what the board approves as the final ordinance. If the board wants us to come back to consider it, we'll advertise it later.
Right.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I would be in favor of, yeah.
We can come back with the phasing options, and based on that discussion, then we would advertise it and adopt it. It will
Yeah.
shift out, so probably something else we just need to put on the record for the viewing public is that you cannot just implement these fees. There's a statutory 90-day wait period for the fees to go into effect. So upon adoption, whatever that turns out to be, there's 90 days before we can implement the new fees at whatever level we're implementing them at. That gives people, builders, developers, time to deal with projects they have in process. And the impact fee rate that will be applied to those building permits is locked at building permit application. So essentially, there's 90 days for people that are close to being ready to apply for building permits to get in here and apply for those permits.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions for the county attorney and for our staff. Mr. Klatskow, in terms of our legal requirements, do we have any legal requirement to build plants and extend lines? You know, developer comes in, and we got 22,000 units out east. They're all willing to pay impact fees in advance and all of that. Are we required to provide service to any of those developers?
This board has approved multiple towns, villages in the RLSA with the assurance that they would be getting these utilities. Now, we can always put off and have the developer put in their own system. The problem with that is that these systems tend to be less than what we would build, and then we've got to take it over and deal with that.
So theoretically, we don't have to do some of the things we're talking about doing. The individual developers would then be required, if they're going to develop, to provide their own package plants and that sort of thing.
Just like Ave Maria did. Ave Maria did that because we didn't have the capability of hooking up then.
So, because the statement was made that, you know, property owners are out there and we have an obligation to provide the plants and the lines, and I don't think we have a legal obligation to do that. We may have a moral obligation, we may have approved things with the understanding that, yeah, we're going to try to do this, but I'm just asking the legal question, and it sounds like we don't have a legal obligation, for example, today, to approve an increase in impact fees so we can build plants and lines to service future development. Now, if impact fees have been paid in advance, maybe we have to refund those, but that's a whole different story. But I think I've got the answer to that question. So then, my question to you is, what if we just don't do this? We keep the impact fees the way they are. What does the sky fall? I mean, what happens?
You would need to raise the user fee to make up for the difference.
Well, no, I'm asking, what if we don't raise these impact fees, which basically means we don't move forward with some of the construction plans that we're talking about?
Well, Commissioner, I think if we don't build the capacity that the growth models are telling us are going to be required as new people connect, we'll have to stop connections, essentially, so there would be no services available as we approached capacity of existing capacity.
So in that scenario, people would not be able to build a house unless they had on-site water and sewer septic systems and wells. They wouldn't be getting county service. They could still build 1 unit per 5 acres or 1 unit per 2.5 acres as long as they had the septic system. Is that, I mean, obviously you're not going to build 2,200 units with a septic system, but again, what would happen if we just simply say, okay, we're going to take a pause here, we're not going to build these facilities right now?
Again, not being an expert, I mean, Jeff, you may want to take it, but I think the village, the concept of the towns and villages was to build more densely and leave free space, as opposed to, say, for instance, building in the estates where you've got the large, 1 home per 2.5 or 5 acres. So that's where it would be feasible to have an impact, to have a well and a septic, versus in a town or a village, that wouldn't be feasible.
Okay, and they would have to build their own package plants.
That would be the only other alternative, yeah.
But I guess my question is, what does that do to our ongoing plan, not our ongoing plans, but projects that are already under construction? Is there something under construction that is in reliance on this at this point? What's the?
No, the projects that are under construction, we've already bonded, and so there's funding available to continue those. For instance, we just started the deep injection wells up on the northeast site. Those were a prerequisite for building the wastewater treatment plant. Doesn't mean that you have to build the wastewater treatment plant, but you have to have the deep injection wells before you have the plant. So anything that's under construction, the transmission water mains in Golden Gate City are underway, and they'll be completed.
In reference to affordability, I think I tend to disagree with one of the comments concerning whether these impact fees would affect affordability. If we take a look at the Renaissance project, which I don't know if necessarily that's a good project for comparison purposes, but that's ultimately a 360, 380 unit facility over at the Golden Gate Golf Course. In order to be able to obtain financing for that project because of the reduced rental rates, the county actually provided impact fee, I'm not sure if you call them impact fee waivers or deferrals. I know that we went through a lot of issues dealing with, okay, how can we close the gap between the financing that's available at current financing rates to fund a project where the rental rates are reduced because they're affordable. And so we wound up, if you could perhaps fill us in as to how we filled that gap, at least that portion of the gap dealing with impact fees.
So essentially, we're using various funding mechanisms to pay impact fees on behalf of the developer. Ultimately, there's going to be a repayment, long-term repayment on that money. So it's essentially a longer-term deferral. We don't, in connection to that project, we don't use the term deferral, and it's actually similar to another one that we were working on in ECOS. It's another low income, it's a tax credit project where they needed a longer period of time to be able to address those impact fees. So we've used one funding source to pay them with an ultimate payback coming back to the county.
What is that time period?
They needed about 18 years on that. I think that one stretched out to maybe 30 years maximum. But to talk about maybe something that's a little bit more simple, these two projects are complicated because of all of the various funding streams coming into them. The county does have several impact fee deferral programs that are heavily utilized. One is for owner-occupied single-family homes. Habitat is a big user of that particular program where a certain portion of their impact fees are deferred for the lifetime of home ownership. Triggering event would be loss of homestead, sale or transfer of the home. Otherwise, a person can live in the home and have their impact fees deferred until one of those triggering mechanisms. We do have a traditional deferral program for affordable housing rentals. You'll see those utilized a lot in the mixed type of developments that we have where you may have some market rate, but then a portion has been dedicated to affordable housing. They have a 10-year deferral, straight deferral that can be extended by the board, and that tends to work well in a project that has some market rate because they can make that financing work. We've really been looking at ways to address the impact fees through various funding sources to be able to provide that longer-term deferral to projects without getting away from the point that you don't want a term on a deferral longer than the useful life of the infrastructure it's intended to fund. So keeping that balance. Now, water and sewer impact fees in a lot of these programs are treated differently, but when you're looking at being able to essentially defer the majority of the impact fees, the payment of those water and sewer impact fees becomes way less of an issue.
Are we able to defer payment of water and sewer impact?
We typically do not, but we can use other funding sources to pay them. We've used in the past, we had a revolving fund that paid impact fees for water and sewer. It was funded in by the general fund. And again, we've used some of the SLRF money, COVID money, to be able to pay water and sewer impact fees on behalf of developers.
Okay, so bottom line is we can more freely defer road impact fees and those types of impact fees, but when it comes to water and sewer, because of statutory provisions, we don't have as much flexibility with those.
It has to do with some of their bond covenants, and also simply that even though I hate to say it, because I managed the impact fee program for however long it was, and we try to treat all of the kids equally. Facts are that if you can't turn on the tap or flush the toilet, that's the most important component of infrastructure that we have. You can sit in traffic and you're probably not going to die. You might get really mad, but you have to have clean water and you have to be able to flush the toilet. And
Yeah,
that's just the
especially if
simple
you're
facts.
stuck in traffic and you bring plenty of bottled water with you, you should be okay.
Yes, right.
Well,
So
then-
Trinity's going to hate me forever. Sorry, Trinity.
Then, again, just another question for the county attorney. So we have a lot of the workforce in affordable housing that's going up is in the urban area, pardon me, where service is already available. Are we able to have sort of a double impact fee system where if you're in an area where service is currently available, you don't need a new plant built for, we'll use the Renaissance project as an example. We don't need a new plant built in order to provide capacity for the Renaissance project. Are we able to have perhaps two different types of impact fee programs where if you're in an area that is currently, where service is currently available, that the impact fee structure stays the same, but if you're in an area where the development's going to require new infrastructure, that you have a higher impact fee?
We would have to bifurcate the county to like Eastern Utility and then the Western Utility, and at that point in time, do separate rate studies to see what the cost would be.
And the reason I'm asking that is that I am persuaded that affordability of housing is probably the number one housing issue we have in this community. I think it's probably the number one issue almost anywhere in the country. And when we take little steps, and this $4,000 or $6,000 increase in impact fees may sound like a little bit of a small step compared to the overall price, it does affect affordability. And I'm wondering if there's a way where we can have our cake and eat it too, if you will, where we increase impact fees for these new developments that are going to require the new facilities, but we don't increase the impact fees for development within the areas that are currently being served with existing facilities.
If the board wishes to do that, we could bring back, we can bring an item back to the board. We would have to set up separate districts at that point in time, and I would have to check the special statute that created the district to see if we could even do that.
I understand it would be complicated and it would be painful for staff to have to even take a look at something like this. But again, just throwing this out as a possibility where NABOR has indicated that this will have an impact on affordability in terms of affordable housing. I tend to agree with it. Maybe there's a way we can do this without that major impact, at least in the current urban area.
But this is like a balloon. If you reduce the impact fees for part of the county, the other county is going to be paying even more impact fees.
So if I may, we looked at this exact issue relative to transportation impact fees. Commissioner McDaniel knows this well. Due to the extent, so road impact fees, looking at trip lengths, same argument. Urban area, trip lengths are short, and then when you get out into the rural areas, trip lengths are very long, has a direct impact on the rate setting. And when we looked at that, it was absolutely disproportionate and burdensome to the eastern areas to try to move towards that type of district. So Jeff's exactly right. It can squeeze down one side, and you're going to watch the eastern portion of this county really be affected.
We're essentially subsidizing the eastern expansion with charging the same rates throughout the county. It's essentially what we're doing.
Understood. And that, I guess, what I'm suggesting is maybe we shouldn't do that. But if we did this, and it obviously would require a lot of evaluation, but if we did this, then you'll have developers, and you take a look at the 22,000 units. So they have a high impact fee. If they're going to pay it, that's one thing. But if they don't want to because of the increased cost, they always have the option to do their own package plans to promote these development of these 22,000 units.
We would, within the boundaries of the water sewer district, we would have to agree to that. That is part of the issue that we've been trying to actually get away from with the expansion of the boundaries of the water sewer district, is to control how many of those private or independent utilities are out there. They've been problematic for us in the past. It's not something that, under the current model, is encouraged.
And was the intent of the special act is to reduce the proliferation of package treatment plants? That was the whole idea behind the legislature creating the water sewer district, in terms of preventing that from happening in the future.
Well, times have changed, circumstances have changed, and maybe we need to just have a little bit different thinking in terms of how to proceed. I'm not suggesting that we do any of that. I just want to get on the record that we do have some potential options that may facilitate development of workforce and affordable housing, certainly in the western part of the county, even though that may have a negative impact on the eastern part of the county. So just food for thought. I don't know if the board has any interest in even exploring any of that, but I think that might be something worth looking at.
If I may, we may be better off looking at different ways to address the impact of these. And this is not going to be the last time that we have this conversation. We have 12 individual impact fees. 10-ish of them are going to be coming back for a conversation. If the impact on those rate increases is something that the board has an appetite for discussing relative to affordable housing, we're back to the conversation about how do we handle or otherwise subsidize those impact fees to bring down that cost burden on the developer. So we're back to looking at a funding source, another mechanism that's better than a deferral.
Yeah. I think I've always been a supporter of impact fees, going back many, many years. So I don't want to be in a position where our current ratepayers or our current taxpayers are subsidizing future growth. That would not be an objective at all. So if we start looking at reducing impact fees or eliminating them and looking for other funding sources, I don't know if that's a path that I would want to go down.
No, sorry, I was only saying relative to specific affordable housing projects is getting more aggressive in pursuing other funding sources that could help to buy down the impact fees for those specific projects. Not a reduction in impact fees overall. Would be keeping the impact fee program intact because of the importance of it, and it is part of the reason that we are able to do a lot of the things that we do here, because we are not burdening our taxpayers with that growth, but rather to look at ways that we can handle the impact fees differently for specific affordable housing projects. It may just mean looking at, we've stayed sort of in the traditional deferral lane for a pretty long time. There's not a lot of things that are better than that, but we could take another look at it and see if there are ways that they could be handled differently that would speak to the fact that it's a cost being borne, rather than trying to rework the entire system.
I'm fully aware of how it's easy for me or for the board to suggest certain things to look at and how difficult it will be for staff to take a look at those things. Having been in your position and various positions in the past, I understand that it's simple for me to raise some issues. It's a whole lot more difficult to get your arms around it. But I think that the bottom line is I would like to see us perhaps being a little bit more creative in our thinking, because we do have new problems. We didn't have an affordability problem 10 years ago in terms of workforce housing. That's something that's really developed in the last, I think probably the last 4 or 5 years, to the extent that we have it now. And so again, just looking at maybe some other approaches that we can look at that perhaps will help deal with that problem. At least I would support phasing of this at a very minimum.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Well, the housing affordability issue has been going on for quite some time. You and I came into office in 2016. The colleagues that were predecessors to this board hired the ULI to come and do a rate study to diagnose the affordability. And in the last paragraph of their however long report, the last page is the most important part of that. Housing affordability has been around for ever since we've been here. I mean, it's changed. It changes with the economic circumstances. It changes with our population. It changes all of the time. But one of the most important statements that came out of that report from the ULI was every $1,000 incremental increase in the price of a house precluded 131 people in our demographic with the income ratios that we have from affording that home. So this tax, impact fees, are a tax on the first person coming in. These are new fees that are being paid by new developers and new home buyers. So this slippery, I consider it to be a slippery slope to be heading down to a differentiation between old impact fee payers and ratepayers and new impact fee payers and ratepayers. I presume it to be a slippery slope for us to enter into circumstances where you remember how dilapidated the Orange Tree facility was when you were the lawyer that actually put that together in the first place, when the Collier County had to take it over and the subordinate infrastructure that was in place, we had to take that system over because it was failing. And the Golden Gate FGUA, when we took over Golden Gate City's utility, same circumstance. The ratepayers were getting whacked with enormous amounts of expense, and no capital was being put back into place for the repairs and maintenance and the necessary upkeep of that facility, of that utility. I think it would be prudent for us to explore the phasing of this proposal. Staff's proposal coming to us today is a one-time shot. And I think we should defer this decision at least for 2 weeks to have an analysis done against the necessities, as I talked about, the known necessities, the known capital expenditures in relationship to the fee increases that are being proposed. And I think phasing it, again, Joe did a nice job on I'm not talking about a complicated phasing process. If it's 2 years, it's a 50% increase. If it's 3 years, it's a third, and a third. And then having that weighed against the necessities for us to be able to make the decisions that we've got forthcoming. I also think it's important for us to remember we're in the middle of our budget discussions. I've been a huge advocate for looking at different ways to manage our revenue streams. I've never been a fan of impact fees. You were and have been, but I've never been a fan. When I came into office in 2016, we did not have a capital asset replacement and maintenance fund. We do now. I think it's called a 301 fund. We have it now. It's in fact in place. We hadn't been, and I think when we had our first budget workshop, if I recall, Ed Finn had a slide up during that workshop that close to $105 million a year needs to be put away in order for ultimate repairs and maintenance and ultimate replacement of the infrastructure that we have, of the assets that the county has. We fund about 77, I think, if I recall from the slide, there was about 70, just shy of $80 million a year that we do fund in the pay-go process that we've always had. We didn't ever have any kind of a reserve for capital asset replacement, ultimate replacement, and then in turn maintenance. And so I think it was suggested, and I would really like to explore it, how, we're in the middle of our budget discussions right now. We're going to have a discussion today on the millage rate. We saw a slide from the consultants at ResourceX that talked about somewhere between 87 million and 157 million of reallocation and new funding without new taxation. He wasn't able, the consultant wasn't able to give me the delineation between the reallocation and the new funding, right? We still don't know what that is. We haven't seen that final report yet. We're supposed to see it here soon, I hope. But I know, in words of reallocation, means something's getting cut. When you're moving money from one place to another, expenses are being reallocated, and so something's not getting funded when something is getting funded. And that, again, needs to be weighed against and measured against the priority and the necessity of the expense in relationship to the cost associated with it. So we do have new budgeting processes in place. We do have a capital asset replacement and maintenance fund that is in fact established. It's not being funded to the level that it needs to be in order to be met. But I'm concerned about going to a separate rate structure between the urban area and the rural area. And it's not just because I'm elected by the people that live in the rural area. It puts us on a slippery slope of ending up where we were at before, with developers putting in substandard infrastructure at a lower expense, and then the government is burdened at a later date for that acquisition to provide those services. So for now, as you've already said, Commissioner Saunders, we're pretty well tied up by the legislature with regard to what we can and can't do with water and sewer. We pretty much have to go along these lines. We don't have a lot of latitude, not nearly as much as we do in some of the other impact fees that we're going to ultimately get to study. So I think for today's discussion, it would be prudent for us to set this aside for a couple of weeks, come back, have a discussion about the phasing potential and the impacts of that phasing, and then make our decision, because we have to advertise. Commissioner LaCastro, you brought up a very valid point, and that is whatever we advertise is what we're going to be voting on. We technically can't change it once it's advertised, so we can't just throw things up against the wall. We have to advertise what we're going to ultimately vote on. So I think it would be prudent for us to set this aside for a couple of weeks, come back, have that discussion, and make a determination then as to whether we go for the full boat that staff's recommending, or a phased approach.
Mr. LaCastro.
Thank you. I just want to summarize what I've heard. Obviously, you're coming back, Joe. I think, we can count noses, like to say. So with the phasing option, but I just wanted to add a couple of things. So, Commissioner Saunders, when he said, hey, what if we just didn't do this? And we're talking hypothetically just to get some ideas. And I liked his idea about, hey, let's think creatively out of the box. Some things are going to fall out very quickly. Some aren't. But what I would like to see, and maybe you don't have to burn too many brain cells on it, but 80% is what the algorithm, sort of says and supports. Going to 0 and not doing it, you answered that question for Commissioner Saunders. Hey, it's not really realistic. But just as part of the options to present to us, so that they either fall out quickly because it doesn't make sense, but at least we're touching all the bases. What if we went less than 80%? And I'm not talking phasing. I'm just saying if we went 60%, how would that affect things? I would just like to see that, so that, much like how you just answered quickly here, oh, okay, that would really be difficult to do. I wouldn't be a supporter of the separate district, similar to what Commissioner McDaniel just said. It reminds me of people that send me emails and say, I don't have any children. Why do I have to pay a school tax? My house will never burn down. Why am I paying for fire departments? And we don't, that's not really how county government works. It's spread out across the entire county. But if that's an option to just sort of show how it could be done, and then why it may or may not be a viable option. I don't think anybody up here was implying that it's a viable option. It's just, could it be? Why wouldn't it be? So that at least we're touching all the different things. So that's what I'm sort of hearing. A phasing option, maybe separate districts, although I don't think that one's going to have that one's going to fall out, at least in my mind, pretty quickly. But then also, what damage do we do if we went less than 80%? Not 0, but just I'll just make a wild guess here. What if we did 50%? What would be the impact? And then hearing that answer would probably start to funnel us into some very specific approvals, just so we could look at all the different options of being creative and not swallowing this in one. I think everybody feels phasing, and you even said in my office, would make sense, but maybe some of the other things incorporate into your proposal, so we really are shaking the tree as hard as we can before we vote on it.
Commissioners, just so you all know, the study sets the maximum legal limit for the fees. The board does have the authority to adopt a lower fee.
Right.
It doesn't have to be in phase. It could be a lower fee just at one time. What we'll bring back to you is what what will happen is.
Yeah, what's the
things
ramifications?
will fall out of the capital plan. We'll bring that back to you with some options
Right.
along with the phasing
Yeah,
options.
80 is the high mark,
The
right?
maximum legal limit, you cannot go
Yeah.
above it.
So yeah, it'd be nice to see a couple of, just examples of if we went 40, if we went 60, what like you said, what the ramifications would be. So we really have, a full set of parameters to consider and then vote on. Thank you.
Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just right off the bat, I'd like to just make a comment that I agree with a lot of the things my constituents have said up here. I would be interested in seeing some language with a possible phase-in type language coming back to us. So we have the opportunity to see what that would look like and what impact that would be overall. I surely don't think separating the county into districts would be a good idea. I'm not in favor of that. But I know Danny at NABOR, and I do respect a lot of what she has to say. And I just want to separate. I think we're talking about two different things sometimes up here when we sit in the dais. I know we referred to a couple projects as affordable housing, but in reality, those are apartments. Those aren't true people owning a piece of dirt in Collier County. And I think when Danny speaks, I think she's speaking more on the basis of actually median income people, families, 2.1 children, owning actually a home in Collier County, not so much living in an apartment, where we do have, according to the county manager, we do have programs in place to work with people that want to invest their own money in developers to create affordable apartments for workforce housing, things of that nature. I think overall we have to start looking at, people that actually have a piece of this county and become part of this county and living that American dream and actually have the ability to own a house in this county. And I think when you put the cost back on a developer or the builder to create their own water and sewer infrastructures in these developments, they just put that cost right back on the price of those homes. They roll it back. And that's no way to create affordable housing or affordable houses that people would actually own and call their own and make that investment, the most important investment in their lives here in Collier County. I think that falls on us to provide some of these services to these communities we already agreed on. Because that does make a difference when it comes down to it. And the number one driver we all have to understand for lower priced housing is inventory. And if we can't provide the infrastructure for the inventory, then like the county manager said, if you can't drink the water and you can't flush the toilet, you can't get a CO. So that house will never be built. And if we diminish the inventory, we basically just drive the prices up. So I think, and like Commissioner Castro said, I get those same things all the time. I don't have any children in school. 50% of the public don't have children in our public schools, but they still pay school taxes. So, and a lot of times these developers, they understand they have to budget for these impact fees down the road. Maybe they don't build 2,000 homes in this particular project. They build 1,500 or whatever. But in reality, typically the homeowner, usually their portion of it's covered in their loan anyways. It's just written into their loan, a few extra dollars that they're going to take out financial. I don't think it affects them up front as much as we think. But yes, I think we need a little bit more time. I would like to see some language in there for a phase-in and see what that can do and what exactly, like Commissioner Castro said, why 80%? What would 60 or 75 or 55% look like? Will it still achieve the same thing down the road? So that's kind of my opinion, just from sitting back and listening and what I'm getting from it. But I think we have to understand that there's more to just building apartments and calling them affordable housing. This is about people wanting to be part of Collier County, wanting to have a piece of their own land to call their home. We are definitely failing on that point. So that's pretty much what I got to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to work toward a court reporter break for 10 minutes, but I want to go to Commissioner McDaniel, and if we can get a motion,
I'm going to do that if
Okay.
you call on me.
do it.
Okay. Does the point that Commissioner Kowal was making was extremely valid, and it comes back around to us as a government looking at how we're doing what we're doing. We're taking, and I'm going to cite this as an example, we're taking there aren't very many $20,000 lots, but we're taking a $20,000 lot. We've been collecting taxes, real estate taxes on that forever. And we're creating a $500,000 home. And then we collect new real estate taxes on the spread between the 20 and the new 500. And a shift in how we're accounting for the increased tax revenue needs to be accounted for at some particular stage. And that's something that I would like for us to explore as we're looking at all of these different alternatives in a reappropriation of the tax revenues that we're in fact receiving to support the life-sustaining infrastructure that we have already and will in fact be creating. That's the discussion that I'd like for us to follow. So with that, I'm going to make a motion. We defer this for 2 weeks. Staff comes back to us with a phasing proposals for a 2-year phase-in and a 3-year phase-in, weighed against the necessities and in regard to our capital exposures.
I'll second that.
Do we want to look at more options other than just a 2-year and a 3-year? Do we want to extend that a little bit?
Yeah, and also the change in the percentage, you know, how what the impact would be if we went less than 80%. You know, I think you wrote down all the different options.
I don't mind amending my motion to add those in. I mean, it's a fairly, what I'm proposing is a fairly simple delineation weighed against our exposures. We can certainly look at it. For information purposes, we can look at it, but the algorithm that spit out this number is what it is based upon what those exposures are, but we can certainly add that in. I'll add that to my motion, Commissioner Saunders.
I'll amend the second.
Okay.
Great. So we have a motion and a second to come back with the new data. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, so moved. All right, let's come back at 11:15 for a short court reporter break, and then we'll finish up.
Chair, you have a live mic.
Right, that brings us to the millage.
Does. Item 11C is a recommendation to adopt a resolution establishing the maximum property tax rates to be levied in FY 2024-25 and reaffirm the advertised public hearing dates in September 2024 for the budget approval process. Mr. Chris Johnson, your Director of Corporate Financial Planning and Management Services, is here to present.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Chris.
For the record, Chris Johnson, your Corporate Financial and Management Services Director. And as Ms. Patterson said, today we are looking to adopt a resolution which establishes the maximum property tax rates to be levied in FY 24-25 and reaffirm our advertised public hearing dates for adoption of the FY 24-25 amended tentative budgets on September 5th, 2024, and the FY 24-25 millage rates and final adopted Collier County budget on September 19th, 2024. Today, briefly, what we're going to go through, I'm going to touch back on the budget timeline to show you where we're at in the process. We're going to go over the July taxable values that were received on July 1st. We'll show you the MSTU proposed maximum millage rates, and then we'll have a discussion on the countywide and unincorporated area maximum millage rate ranges. And then finally, we'll go through and adopt the maximum millage resolution. It's important to note that adopting this resolution will establish the maximum millage rates to be levied for FY 24-25. With that said, the board will have opportunities through September to maintain the lower millage rates in each, to maintain or lower the millage rates in each taxing district. Moving on to the schedule, I know you guys are all familiar with this by now. I'll just go through it briefly. We're turning it kind of that peach color very slowly. Looks like we're about halfway through at this point. You can see in bold there today at 7-9, board adopts the proposed millage rates and the maximum property taxes to be levied. On 7-12, we will be providing the board with a tentative FY25 budget by fund. This will include a change log with any changes that have been made since your priority-based budget hearing last month on June 20th. From there, on or before 8/24/24, the property appraiser will mail the trim notices to all the property owners within the county. The trim notice will include the last year's tax rate, tax levy, this year's rollback rate, potential tax levy related to that rollback rate, and the maximum millage rates and the tax levy related with those millage rates, along with the date for the first public hearing. The first public hearing is scheduled, as I stated before, for September 5th. The second public hearing is scheduled for September 19th, and that will be the final public hearing where the millage rates and the budget will be adopted. Any questions on the schedule? All right, let's get to the certified taxable value. We received this from the property appraiser on July 1st, as I stated earlier. The county-wide taxable value increased $14.3 billion from about $138 billion to $152 billion overall. Of that, $4.6 billion is net new taxable value. That is the tax levy associated with that net new taxable value is included in the rolled back rate. In the unincorporated area, the tax value increased $9.2 billion from $87 billion to $96.5 billion. In the unincorporated area, the net new taxable value is $3.2 billion. And I know you've seen the bottom of the slide at the workshop, but I just wanted to reiterate it again. According to the State Ad Valorem Estimating Conference, they're projecting continued tax base increases of 10.2 and 7.1% through tax year 2025 and 2026.
Quick.
Go ahead.
Quick, the 14 million, is the 9.2 billion included in the 14 million, or is that in addition to?
It's included in it. So the 9.2 is a portion of the countywide 14 point.
Okay. You just distinguish it because of the unincorporated area in relationship to the incorporated. I got you.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on this slide? All right, so moving into the MSTU proposed millage rates. Per budget policy, the MSTU budgets were established to cover the operational needs for FY25 and any planned capital allocations for those MSTUs. The proposed maximum millage rates you see here were set to support those budgets that we went through during the workshop. Of note here is the Radio Road Beautification MSTU was reestablished. The proposed maximum millage rate for that is 0.1 mils. And also, we have a newly established private road MSTU with a proposed maximum millage rate of 1 mil. Any questions on any of those at all? Those were all set per policy. All right. Moving on to the ranges that we need to discuss today. So what you're going to see here are the millage rate ranges for the 3 county-wide taxing districts and the unincorporated area taxing district. The ranges you see here are from the rollback rate to the millage neutral rate. I'll just run through them real quick. The general fund rollback rate is 3.0107. The millage neutral rate would be 3.2043. The water pollution control rollback rate is 0.0246, and the millage neutral rate would be 0.0263. Conservation Collier rollback rate would be 0.2096, and the millage neutral rate would be 0.2242. As we go down to the unincorporated area general fund there at the bottom, the rollback rate would be 0.6844, and the millage neutral rate would be 0.7280. And I know you're probably staring at me like, what does that mean, Chris? So we'll go on to the next slide to show you the dollars associated with
Oh, I thought you were going to ignore it. Like, what does that mean? Just moving on.
So as you can see here, this slide depicts the tax levy associated with those millage rates I just went through. The column there in the greens shows the increase over last year's adopted tax dollars for the rolled back rates in each of these funds. And then the column in the blue shows the tax dollars associated with the millage neutral rate based on last year's tax. And then finally, the yellow column shows the difference between a millage neutral and a rolled back rate. Any questions on that slide at all? This is kind of where we probably should have the discussion on what we want to do with the maximum millage rate going forward. As you noticed in the executive summary, this year we kind of left those ranges opened per kind of the policy discussions we had in February and in actually and in March and in at our workshop in June. So
just so I'm clear on this, you got $15 million is an increase in money based on the rollback rate
correct.
because of growth.
And that's attributable to that $4.6 billion
Okay.
in growth.
All right, got you.
No other questions on this?
No.
Well, all right. Well, then, I guess at this point, we need to decide where we want to move with the maximum millage rates for those 4 taxing districts, the 3 countywide and the unincorporated. The MSTU districts, as I stated, were the proposed rate was calculated based on the budgetary need in those areas.
So we need how many have we got to adopt? Can we just do countywide, or have we got to do all of them?
At the moment, we just need direction on the countywide and the unincorporated, and then at the end, and then once we have that, we can move forward with the motion to adopt maximum millage rates in all those areas.
All right. Troy, how many public speakers have we got? 2? Let's hear them now.
Your first speaker is Brad Cornell, and he'll be followed by Michelle Leonard.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm Brad Cornell. I'm here on behalf of Audubon Western Everglades and Audubon, Florida. Appreciate the opportunity to address you on the budget maximum millage rate hearing you have today. Audubon strongly recommends the maximum millage rate for Conservation Collier be set at the original 0.25 mils. This is clearly needed for the following program functions, and I'll go through and tick them off one by one so it's clear where we stand on this. First, discussions and commitments variously made by individual board members over the past year and in the March ordinance revisions have indicated your intention to definitely refrain from transferring any further Conservation Collier trust funds to non-conservation uses, except in emergencies, and to restore the funds transferred in the current fiscal year 24 budget. Second, the board has also emphasized the value of Conservation Collier's fully invested trust funds, especially the Land Management Trust Fund, being available as a de facto emergency reserve, which was the role it played after Hurricane Irma in 2017, because previous boards had wisely invested religiously in that trust fund. Third, with that, I want to point out that the land management costs are rising. You saw in your budget director's analysis that land values have increased over 10% in the past year. So that directly influences the ability of Conservation Collier to buy land. The Management Trust Fund has been set up for 20 years as an endowment fund, and that Management Trust Fund, prior to budget transfers last year, had approximately $42 million, which was anticipated to generate about $1.2 million annually in interest. That must be doubled to meet current long-term annual management obligations as you acquire more land. Next, the target protection areas list coming to you in August is robust and builds on your existing preserves all over the county. With this year's rolled back tax rate and a possible rollback of that rolled back rate for fiscal year 25, the board would be keeping tax revenues for Conservation Collier flat while prices for land and land management costs continue to escalate. That is a significant cut in Conservation Collier's effectiveness at a critical time in the balance of development and preservation. Finally, I just want to reiterate, Audubon recommends the board levy the usual 0.25 mils for Conservation Collier per public expectation and support in order to continue your aggressive conservation land acquisition pace and replenishing the funds in the Land Management Trust Fund, which, if you want to do this in perpetuity, which is the kind of the name of the game, that's what we need to do. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Your next and final speaker is Michelle Lenhart.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Michelle Lenhard, Chair of Conservation Collier Committee, your committee. I want to thank you for your continued support of the Conservation Collier program, also for your work strengthening during the ordinance revision process and the work you've done to strengthen our ordinance and to expedite the acquisition process and accelerate it. CLAC has been a partner in this, and I wanted you to know that I watch the recordings of your meetings and share your feelings with our committee so that we can really stay on track with your direction. As you approach this budget season for 24-25, I just wanted to highlight again the increasing costs on our acquisition and maintenance budget. Using the Williams Farm application as an example, our 5,000 acres currently in protection would go for that application alone to 6,400 acres. And with that, additional maintenance costs, which would increase the maintenance budget pressure to an additional $1 million for that property alone. So our management obligations are significant and worthy of consideration. You'll be seeing the target protection mailing area maps coming up shortly in August. Within those maps is the I-75 Everglades Boulevard area that's of interest to this board, and that includes 550 acres alone for that section of our county. So there's important work to be done, and your continued support is very critical on this. Thank you.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, and I want to say, repeat it again. Today, all we're doing is setting the maximum millage rate that we can in fact go to. We don't have all of the data yet. We don't have the report from Resource X yet. We don't have we have not had the discussion on potential reallocation and or new revenue streams without new taxation. So it would be my preference today to set the maximum millage rate at rate neutral, which is highlighted here in blue. And then, once we have the balance of the data, then we can make our decisions accordingly with regard to rollback rate or whatever in fact we're going to do in September. So I'll make a motion to stay at rate neutral.
I'll second it, and we should have that report this afternoon. You figure? In discussions, we're looking for it this afternoon.
Good.
So we have a motion to keep the millage neutral and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So moved.
And if I could, the MSTU rates as proposed with another motion by chance? Can we do that, Jeff?
Are they separate rates?
They are. The MSTUs are the separate ones that were done. We put a proposed based on the needs and the capital expenditures. So those, unless you want all of those to be millage neutral down the line, some of those are rollback in that list.
Are any of them above rollback? I mean, are any of them above millage neutral?
Yes, because we have a reestablished MSTU and we have a private road.
Just the new ones.
Newly established MSTU.
There was one point, if I may, on the private road MSTU. I know we capped it at 1%, but there was I think I had proposed a $500,000 to stage it in.
And currently, this would be the maximum. So if we decide to go that route later, we could.
Got it. And then we'll have a look at the actual expenditures associated with those private roads then. So I'll make a motion for this proposed millage rate for the MSTUs as well.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded to keep these rates. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? So moved.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 15. Item 15A is public comments on general topics not on the current or future agenda by individuals not already heard during previous public comment in this meeting.
We have no registered speakers at this time.
Very good. That brings us to item 15B, which is staff project updates. Just wanted to touch briefly on a couple of things here. First, just an update on DAS. DAS Building 5 is under construction now, or under demolition. No, we're taking out the insides, the insulation, renovations. Thank you. It looked like a spaceship landing out there last week. We had folks in hazmat suits and all sorts of interesting stuff going in there to deal with that building. So that's well underway. We are continuing to improve all of the daily activities there, cleaning processes. Big thank you to all of the county staff that's been helping out, as well as our DAS staff that continues to hang in there with us while we go through this. We do have a number of dogs that are being boarded at an off-site location to be able to make space for this work, and we do have a connection with another group. They're actually we have somebody there that's doing dog play groups for the next 2 months, thanks to the hard work of our volunteers. It's Dog Playing for Life. They potentially would be able to take a few dogs for us and maybe help get them adopted out or at least board them. So as we continue to be sure that we can provide space for those animals in need while we go through this process. All of our adoptions are back open. You recall that we did have a little bit of cat illness going through, which is common during kitten season, but we're back open. We had 19 cat adoptions on Saturday or Sunday, so that was great. A number of dog adoptions, so it's very exciting. So we're very thankful to the board for your support, and again to the county staff for all the hard work that they're putting in. And if Mr. French has anything he wants to add.
Thank you. For the record, Jamie French, your department head for growth management. On Building 5, just so you know, for those that may have been out there, Building 5 is currently, it is considered a demolition permit under the state law for the state building code. It's interior demolition. Again, we're taking a building that's better than 20 years old that was never air conditioned, not designed for air conditioning. And as we move forward with that progress to remodel the building, we will be issuing additional permits, and we'll be taking that hopefully through the procurement process and put that quick underway. But this is to address all of the building needs for the internal, as well as for the life safety requirements identified within the Florida Fire Prevention Code. The buildings were under fire watch for a period of time, but all of that has been restored, permitted, contracted out by a fire design professional firm that came in, and so we're well underway. Ms. Cook and I are currently looking at the environmental resource permit that exists on that property. You do have designated wetlands that exist just to the east. We're mindful of that. Although that's county property, the state of Florida does recognize that. It is a recalculated woodpecker area, and it needs to be maintained to those preserve standards. So we're looking at all of that, as well as the safety of our volunteers, in addition to the staff and those unfortunate animals that need to spend a little time with us. But well underway. We're hopeful that it won't take too much longer, but we recognize that with construction, we're also tied up with materials, as well as material needs, any type of contract labor. So it's going to take a little bit of time.
Second item for the board is our burn ban was officially lifted on July 1st. It's a requirement of our burn ban ordinance to notify the board that that has been lifted, and it has as of July 1st. With that, I think Mr. Finn wanted to give a brief update on the work at Sun and Fun.
Sure do. Thank you, ma'am. I'm Edward Finn, Deputy County Manager. At the aquatics facility, one of the items that came up is seasonal pass holders for Sun and Fun. Staff has moved out with offering either a reimbursement of those fees or the option to utilize our other facilities, the other 5 facilities that are operating, as well as a 4-month extension for Sun and Fun when that comes back online. So we've moved out with that. Sun and Fun continues to be under the guidance of both our hired professional engineers, staff, and the folks at facilities management. That is proceeding, but that's kind of on a longer track. Our other facilities, those that had a geothermal system, that is the heating and cooling system concerns, those have been resolved at this point in time. Essentially, all those facilities continue to operate and are showing signs of improvement with some of the pump issues that were discussed previously fixed up. One of the nominal outliers is the slide at the Golden Gate facility. That's awaiting repairs to the stair system. That'll be conducted this month. Hopeful to get that opened up or reopened up at the end of the month, early August. With that, if I may, talk maybe briefly about the drone show or the Drones in Paradise show on Saturday. The show generally went well. There was a lot of lessons learned from the last one that were applied, and that includes getting people in earlier, having activities to get them there earlier, having activities at the after the drone show to try to retain them there, and there was some success. There was considerably more parking provided on site. There was an enormous amount of effort to coordinate that parking. I will not say that it went absolutely perfect, but our goal is to just make sure that we learn from previous experiences and improve. The improvement probably could be shown, generally speaking, people getting back out onto 951 instead of a 2-hour. 80% of it was moved out in 45 minutes is what I'm told. The coordination with the sheriff's office, fire districts, our staff, transportation staff, park staff, parks, sports park staff, it was an all hands on deck thing. We, of course, have an after-action meeting planned to learn lessons from this one and try to extend those and continue to improve our performance. With that, that's all I have.
All right, that brings us to item 15C, Staff and Commission General Communications. We probably just gave you everything we have, so County Attorney.
Just going with Ed said, I attended the drone show, and it was by far the best county event I ever attended. Staff did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Jeff.
Were you in the 20% that didn't get out in 45 minutes?
I waited, but it's fine. I mean, I'm used to like New York Giant games. I mean, well, you wait forever.
Commissioners.
Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a whole lot to say. I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to participate today remotely. I'd like to be there in person, but I just happened to be, plans didn't allow me to do that this time. But yeah, once again, and it was funny, we were talking about our impact fees and the dates that were coincided with some things we were talking about earlier, like the chart in 2005 up to 2023. And just for the heck of it, because I had the opportunity to play on my other computer here, I was looking at the property appraiser's website and just looking at, not to pick on that person or beat a dead horse, but I kind of looked up that property in question we discussed earlier in the other agenda item. In 2005, that property was at $89,500, and it sold 2023 for $551,000. So when you see that discrepancy in cost of building and cost of homes, and correlate that with the discussion we had with the impact fees, it kind of shows it just, you're talking about a large percentage change over time. And I really like how the county approaches this with kind of like not a stagnant view. We look at it at the market and we adjust to the market, like in the downfall, the great downfall between 2008 and 2009. We actually lowered impact fees, to mirror what was going on with the market. When housing prices went down and you couldn't get people to build new structures, we were fluid. We weren't stagnant. And I think we have to always take that approach, even moving forward. So that being said, once again, I thank you guys for allowing me to participate today, and look forward to seeing you guys next meeting.
Do you have a tie on?
I do have a collared shirt on.
There you go. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. I was also at the drone show, and it was pretty spectacular. I didn't really see anything that went wrong, but of course I was up in the stands, so I didn't see some of the inner workings. But I think there must have been 10,000 people there, because the stands were full, the fields were full. Over by the cove area, that was full of folks as well. Did you get an estimate of the number of people that were actually there?
The estimate is in excess of 8,000. The previous estimate from the previous event was in the 6,000 to 7,000 range. So we definitely increased the number, and I think we saw more people come in earlier. And while we would have liked to retain more of our guests to ease the egress, we did have a good number remaining, and that'll continue to be a model we try to maximize.
Well, it was a spectacular event. I think everyone I talked to had a great time, and staff did a wonderful job with that, so thank you. I did travel over to DAS on Saturday and Sunday, and the county manager was there on Friday and Saturday. Actually, I was there on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and I talked to a lot of the volunteers, and they are so thrilled with the work that's going on out there. So I just wanted to mention that the manager, along with a lot of other county staff folks, were out there on Friday as well as the weekend doing some hard work. And the volunteers I spoke to were really pretty pleased with the changes out there. As a matter of fact, we adopted a little dog for my mother-in-law, a little one-eyed Chihuahua. Cute little dog, not very attractive, but a cute little dog. Anyway, it was just rewarding to go there and see how wonderful things are turning around there. You mentioned the cooling issue at the Golden Gate Park. That I know there was one pump that was out, and then the existing pump was questionable. And you've said that the cooling issue has been resolved. Does that mean that there are no other issues remaining in terms of cooling for the summer? Obviously, the slide is a different issue, but just the concern about the cooling, because the water was heating up.
Subject to normal breakdowns, it has been restored, and it's anticipated to be solid through the summer. But equipment breaks, and the pump that you referenced is in fact on the list as having been repaired as well.
Okay, but there was another one that I believe was on order, so there'd be a backup?
I'll check on that for you, sir.
Okay, because there used to be two pumps there. One of them completely broke, and the other one's almost ready to break.
Copy that.
All right. Other than that, just again, thank staff for your efforts and look forward to the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I have two things. Happy, I'm going to do the happy first, and then the not so happy second. The happy is our kids at Max Haas, the 9, 10, and 11-year-old kids, little leaguers, won sections. And they are now in the top 8 teams in the state of Florida, and they are traveling to Tampa this coming weekend to compete at states. And so forgive me in advance if I'm probably going to drag them all in here and give them a resolution or something from us and get a picture taken. I'm very proud of those children. I'm friends with a lot of the parents of those kids, and it's quite an event. It's the first time a team from Max Haas has made sections, won sections, and heading to states. So that's an exciting piece of news. The second thing, I have a very dear friend. His name is Huey Howard, cattleman, longtime cattleman rancher here in the state of Florida and in Collier County. He lives in Immokalee. He's not long for this world. And so I'd like to, there's a couple of ways to rename a state, rename a street. And one of the ways is to go get 1,000 petitions on a signature and rename the street. I would like, if it meets with consent of this board, to wave the magic wand and rename Eustis Avenue in Immokalee to Howard Avenue. Now, I'll still go through the motions and we'll still do all of the proper processes, but I wanted to bring it up here today to not go through that 1,000 petition adventure and rename it. He lives on Eustis, and I'd like to rename the street Howard Avenue.
I don't have any problem with that.
You okay with that? Yeah. Okay. The head nod thing, I can't see what Kowal's thinking, so.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Thank you, that's all I have.
I think I'm okay with it, but the only question I would ask is, I don't know the number of businesses and that sort of thing on that particular street.
Yeah, there aren't any.
Okay.
It's a private road off of First when you come in,
Okay, so there's not going to be an impact on people in terms of losing their station area and all that kind of stuff?
No, sir.
Yeah, okay, great.
And we will, just for your brain, we will go through the necessary motions to make sure that there's consent to do this. I'm not even sure that Huey's aware that I'm proposing this, so.
Commissioner LoCastro.
I'm not in favor of like Bill McDaniel Boulevard or anything like that.
Yeah,
so, we shoot that down. We shoot that down immediately.
Maybe there's a short dead-end street there we can name.
Yeah, something where there's a bunch of dumpsters at the end of the dead-end street. Yeah.
Rock crusher.
Yeah.
There's a set of plans sitting around here somewhere with McDaniel Parkway on it, just so you know.
We'll shred those. Just a couple of thanks. We had our county teams, Coastal Zone, and everybody working really hard on 4th of July and also the next day. I can only speak for the beaches that are in my district, and it's mostly Marco and some of the surrounding areas of Key Wade and some of those other connected areas. But got really great reports that soon after the 4th, immediately at dark 30 on the 5th, garbage cans were emptied, beaches were clean. And then another triple check of that is on Marco, there's a group called Friends of Tiger Tail that did a beach cleanup on their own just in case. And James from Parks and Rec and a few others were joined them and went out there. I actually was out of town, but James came back to me and said they actually didn't pick up as much as they usually do when they just do it. The beach cleanup, he says, because the county had done, basically such a good job. And so, and I did get a few notes from people that just said, wow, great job. So just want to make sure that just didn't get lost in translation, because it was, the beaches were, they had a fireworks show on the 4th on Marco and in some other areas where people could see it. And, beach cleanup was impressive by all accounts that came to me. You know, the drone show obviously did have more people, but it really wasn't apples to apples, because if you remember, we did the fireworks on the 4th of July, but we weren't the only game in town. So it was good to see. I'm not taking anything away from, there was, you know, more people there. But I actually liked that idea of, you know, let Marco do their fireworks on the 4th, let the Pier do their fireworks on the 4th, and then people can go enjoy those shows. But if the drone idea for the stadium, for several reasons, it's there's no sound, you know, we don't have any kind of big fire issues, and it just might make the most sense. And it's the perfect venue for it. I think having it a day or two after, you know, so that people can sort of enjoy the Independence weekend, that maybe it just sort of worked out that way this time. I know I got a few questions from people. Why are they doing something on the 6th? And it's so, you know, the answer was because we want it to be the only game in town. And it was on the weekend. It was a Saturday, so it made the most sense. But in the after action meeting, a couple things that I'm sure aren't lost for your checklist, but, you know, that I wrote down, you know, I was there as well. And Ed and I already spoke, but we had a heavy CCSO presence, but we need some sort of traffic directional presence inside the parking lot. So once you made it out of the parking lot, then it was great to see 1,000 cops out there all waving flashlights, but we were already clear of the traffic inside the parking lot. And as we spoke yesterday, you had a lot of pedestrians that were all walking to their cars. And if you're sitting in your car with your car running, you can't run over these people. If there were people in key locations telling the pedestrians, you know, hold up, I'm going to let 20 cars through, we probably could have done a much better job. And the reason that's important is, you know, this drone show might have been a one-time deal, and we'll see how we do next year, but we're on the heels of FC Naples, and they're going to bring a crowd of that size, possibly, or we hope, for 16 games. So although I did have to give some people a bit of reality. Who I think the county manager or county attorney was talking about Giants games. You know, you had some folks, oh, I can't believe it took me 30 minutes to get out of the parking lot. And I had to say to them, have you never gone to a Buccaneer game? Have you never gone to see the Rolling Stones in concert? You don't move for 2 hours, but it doesn't mean we can't do better. So that was one thing. And then also as part of the after action, Ed, the sale of food and beverage, and I think we spoke in more detail in my office, was good, but not great. You know, having to run over to the food truck to buy an incredible barbecue platter, but they weren't allowed to sell beverages, and then you had to go all the way on the other side of the stadium to wait in line again with food you already purchased to buy a bottle of water. Didn't seem to make sense to me. The only place where you could actually buy food and drink was at 1 or 2 locations. Everything else was sort of spread out. And when I talked to some of the vendors, they said, well, that was the rules of the sports complex. So it might be something to just take a look at, because it just, you know, people want to get their food and drink quickly and then get back to watching the soccer game. So we need to do that, you know, a lot better. And then I was really disappointed that every 30 minutes on the big jumbo $1 billion TV that we have out there, the FC Naples commercial wasn't running in a loop. And when I asked the FC Naples folks, they said they asked, quote, county leadership, and it's probably nobody in this room, but somebody at a level in between all of us made a command decision that I think was the wrong one. You had a captured audience there, and for them watching this unbelievably professional commercial that has been blasted everywhere. You know, I had lunch with some FC Naples people yesterday at a restaurant where the owner came out and said, wow, that drone show was amazing. And then I said, oh, I want to introduce you to some leadership for FC Naples, the professional soccer team that's coming here. And he said, what soccer team? And so he went to the drone show and they had a little tent and they were doing season tickets, but you know, FC Naples is part of the county, so you know, integrating them into every event and you know, going overboard, if you will, as much as possible, I think, to market that the team is coming here helps all of us. So I don't know why we would have artificially stifled not showing that commercial. Nobody here would have agreed to that, but somewhere halfway up, someone made a decision. It went to FC Naples. They didn't question it and, you know, missed an opportunity, because 80% of the time that big jumbo screen, which is beautiful and perfectly clear, just had the Drones in Paradise graphic on it. Then they showed the movie, Night at the Museum. They ran our little commercials, and then they went back to the, you know, the Drones in Paradise graphic, and that could have really been incorporated. So, you know, enough of that. But, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this at my TDC meetings as well, because the TDC is highly involved. So I'll just say that. But I agree as well. It was, you know, these are we could sit here for an hour and talk about all the great and wonderful things, but we got to improve every single time because that stadium's not going to get less full. We got bigger things coming. Then Great Wolf Lodge is going to cut a ribbon, and people are going to come over from that. So I'm glad to hear that you have an after-action meeting, and I think maybe the short condensed version of what comes out of that after-action meeting, maybe presenting it to us so that we know, hey, here were the problems, here was the solutions, and here's how it's going to get better would be something I think all of us would benefit from because we're getting notes from constituents all the time, and I'd like us to have concise answers that all match. So that would be helpful.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks for the input. Appreciate
But
the
yeah,
effort.
thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Well, I did not get to make the drone show. After 10 days of 5 grandkids, 11, I was asleep. But I heard amazing things about it, and I'm tickled. I think the feedback was amazing, and I would agree that the FC Naples could have been, that was a great opportunity to toot their horn. County Attorney, if we, is there anything that, if we don't make the 2-week mark, is there anything that's pressing about the impact fee study that if we move it to August the 13th,
No.
it's going to put you behind? Okay. I brought it up last month and, or last meeting. And so if, we decided we were going to work through the summer. And if we want to work, we want to work. If we have something to do, I want to do it. But other than that discussion, there's not a whole lot going on. And I bring this up again because in talking to Resource X, we're going to get that report this afternoon. The report is ready. He just wanted to take a look at it and make sure it was just spot on perfect. So he's promised to have that to us this afternoon. That report's coming to senior staff, and then senior staff will put it to the directors. In talking with him, I said, what is the normal process? What normally takes place? And he said, what normally takes place is they'll get my report, and he said, just like you brought up in the previous meeting, he said, they'll focus on the high-cost, low-impact things and the low-cost, low-impact things first, as basically the low-hanging fruit. And he said, usually they take about a month to look at that and to bring back to the board their recommendations, how they can implement those things. And when they bring that back, we either say, we like that, let's implement that, or no, let's don't do that, let's keep that. Then we have some information to make decisions. If we come back in 2 weeks, I don't think that's going to be enough time for us to have those discussions. And trust me, I'm ready to have those discussions. This is something that's been going on now for a year, and I'm chomping at the bits to get to the root of everything. So if we want to meet, we'll meet, and if we don't, I'll just leave it up to y'all. So I'm going to make a motion that we skip July 23rd and that we come back on August the 13th, not because we're not going to work, we're just not going to meet. So I'll throw it out there. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. I certainly have no objection to not having a meeting when we don't have a lot to deal with. However, my understanding is, in reference to the Renaissance Workforce Housing Project, that there is a deadline for approval of some documentation that has to be done before the 1st of August. And so I know Steve Kirk was planning on being here on the 23rd of July to finalize a few of the basically form documents, but they're documents that have to be approved by this board or by the county manager. Perhaps, Ms. Patterson, you can elaborate, or Mr. Finn?
That's what we were just looking at to see, to make sure we're on track for the 23rd, and then to find out if if we're not going to have a meeting on the 23rd, if I can sign them and then bring them back to get them ratified by the board.
Yes, you can do that.
Will that satisfy the various entities that are involved with those documents, having you authorize them, but that authorization being contingent on being approved by the board in August? I don't know the answer to that question.
We've done this process many, many times over the years. We've never had an issue. I can't tell you won't have an issue on this one, but we've never had one.
Right. Can I make a suggestion? would you contact Mr. Kirk and make sure that that's not a problem? Because I'd hate to lose a project because of a deadline that is really only a technical
Yes, sir.
need. And assuming that process works, then of course we don't have the meeting on July 23rd. But if we do have that one item, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we, even if it's a 5-minute meeting, that we do meet to take care
We
of that.
need to, we can.
We probably won't have to, but I just want everybody to be prepared just in case.
Commissioner, if you want certainty, just authorize Amy to sign documents, but don't come back for ratification, and that takes that issue off. Amy has the full authority to do this.
I have no problem making that motion, even though we don't have the documents in front of us. We don't know exactly what those documents are. I don't have a problem because I assume that Ms. Patterson will use her judgment if there's something that's unacceptable there. So,
as will my office.
All right. So I'll make that motion then, that in terms of the documentation for the Renaissance project that has to be approved in July, that the manager is authorized to sign without having to come back to this board for retroactive approval, and that the county attorney will work with the manager to make sure that everything is as it should be. So I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that. And
Okay.
Amy, you can always send us a one-way communication
Yes,
if
sir.
there was like some concern or something that you had to weigh or something, but I would second that.
Yes, sir.
All right, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I'm opposed to not having the meeting in July. You've been waiting a year to go through this stuff. I've been waiting 7.
I know.
We have meetings with our CRAs that were scheduled for that date, and now apparently have been moved because it's got winded that we weren't going to have a meeting in July. We're going to push everything with regard to our budget discussions back into our August meetings. There are other things that need to be talked about by this government. Again, these are not necessarily pressing issues. These aren't things that have to happen at our second meeting in July, but we have a landfill out there. Commissioner Castro, Commissioner Kowal hasn't even been briefed formally briefed on our landfill and its capacity and its term, when it's actually expiring, decisions that we need to be starting to talk about now in order to extend the life of that landfill so that your 11 grandchildren who come and visit you have a place for their trash to in fact go. These are discussions that need to happen, and we don't need to make, and the reason I voted against the motion for allowing the county manager to sign off is we don't have to make special exceptions if we just have the meeting, have the annual briefings coming from our CRAs that we were planning on, having a report on the landfill, having an hour discussion on our first take of the Resource X. I mean, we're going to have 2 weeks to review that report if he gets it to us today. Having our first blush discussions to help guide our staff with regard to the reallocation and the new funding and that sort of thing. So my obstinance in the vote wasn't to take away the authority of the county manager. We don't need to make special exceptions if we just have our meeting and fill it up. I say fill it up. Utilize the time. I mean, there are things that we can actually do that we aren't. That's all.
No, I totally agree. And I'm all for a day's meeting. I mean, just to come in here, just to have, 3 or 4 hours of discussion. It's like I said, I'm not talking about taking off. I'm talking about just not meeting until we can get those things lined up. So Commissioner DeCastro.
I mean, everyone knows I was a big supporter of having meetings scheduled throughout the summer, but I always caveated that by saying when we got an agenda, or if it looked like the agenda was kind of thin, we always, have the option to say, hey, there's only 1 or 2 things on here. So maybe it's premature to make the decision today if we're not going to have a meeting next time. I mean, we don't want to maybe, cancel it 24 hours prior and then throw everybody into a tailspin. But you just laundry listed a whole bunch of things that could or might be or maybe definitely would be on next week's meeting. 10 minutes ago, I didn't realize, like, you could always put something on the agenda, but I would agree, if it looks like it's an agenda that has some weight to it, we should have it. But, you know, the reality was that, you know, we voted to keep meetings on the books, but the chair always had the option to propose, or any of us, that, hey, I just took a look at the agenda, it looks pretty thin. I think I could use the extra time, like you said, not like we're in the Bahamas, but maybe we're, you know, we're digesting Resource X stuff, or we're talking to constituents or whatever. So I don't know if it's premature to decide 2 weeks in advance when we don't even know what would be on the agenda. If everything you just laundry listed would be on the agenda on the 29th, all of us would probably say, wow, it sounds like that's going to be kind of a busy meeting. But if it's not time critical and we could use the time more efficiently, then, you know, I'd be for, you know, not having a meeting just to have one. But if there were all these items on there and it was throwing some things into a tailspin, I mean, County Manager, can you shed some light on your thoughts?
So regarding the annual meeting of the CRAs, we had just polled the CRAs members to find out what their availability was through the summer. So that's not, it's not time sensitive per se. They're available both July, August, and then into September. So we were going to, you know, try to slot that in. I think they had kind of honed in on the 23rd, but when we had this conversation last meeting, they also provided their availability for those other dates. As far as the conversation about the landfill, we are planning to bring that to the board. This is something that we've been working on for a little while now behind the scenes. We're not quite ready for a presentation on that to the level that that it needs to be for you all. However, again, if we're here at your pleasure, if you want to have a meeting, there's regular business that's done, but there's also processes in place for that regular business to get done through our absentia process. I would say, though, that the decision it would be better for the decision to be made, because obviously we have to give meeting notices. We have staff members slotting in agenda items, even just our regular business, where we would want to know if we're not going to have an in-person meeting on the 23rd. There are certain items that will stay and can be done in absentia, and then there are things that will say, well, this will be a better item for the August meeting.
Well, I mean, if we want to meet, y'all can vote. So I'm just going to make a motion that we skip the 23rd meeting and come back on the 12th with a full agenda. Or the 13th, August the 13th, with a full agenda.
I mean, for the county manager, do you have enough knowledge now to be able to say there's, you know, and there can always be some sort of pop-up, and then that's when you can send a note out and go, hey, I know you all decided not to have a meeting, but we have a hurricane approaching, you know, or something like that. So you always have that knowledge. But do you have enough depth right now to look at the next meeting and feel like it's thinner than normal?
The most pressing issue we had coming for the next meeting was the Renaissance Hall item. The impact fee item, obviously, based on the course of action today, could have gone on the 23rd, but that's not make or break for it to go to the 23rd or the 13th. There isn't any land use, obviously no controversial land use. So we have generally routine items. I'll look at Mr. Finn and see if he has anything else planned to pop on that agenda. It's the Renaissance Hall was our big item.
Okay, and if this motion doesn't pass, then we'll have a meeting on the 23rd, and in that case, you can bring the documents to us for.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
All right, we'll forget that. With that, we're adjourned.
You didn't call for the motion.
Yeah, so are we having the meeting or not? 'Cause
No, I made a motion and it was never seconded.
I didn't hear you call for a second. I thought we were still.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Nope.
Well, I'll make a motion that we skip the 23rd.
There you go.
And if there's no second, then we'll meet. And if there's a second, we'll vote.
I'll make a second just to throw it out there.
Oh, cut it out. Just let it fail.
All right, we have a motion and a second to skip the 23rd meeting so that we can work with Resource X and staff. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails. We'll see you the 23rd.
about fell out my chair. And when you moved your mouth to speak, I felt the blood go to my feet. Now it took time for me to know what you tried so not to show. But something in my soul just cried. I see the want in your blue eyes. Baby, I'd love you to want me the way that I want you, the way that it should be. Baby, you love me to want you the way that I want to, if you'd only let it be. You told yourself years ago you'd never let your feelings show. The obligation that you made